Stage 4 of Giro d'Italia 2013. 244 kilometres, that makes it the second longest stage of this year's Giro. And up front we have 7 riders out front trying to see can they manage to hang on in front of the peloton. Looks unlikely as the gap between them is coming down very quickly indeed. And I can tell you that the weather at the finish line, it has been raining. The riders started in bright sunshine, about 25 degrees centigrade. It's about 10 degrees lower than that at the finish line in Serra San Bruno. They headed out from Policastro Busantino today. It looked like they were going to have another very warm day in the saddle, but it's cooled down nicely and they'll appreciate that. They might appreciate a little less if the roads are still wet when they get to Serra San Bruno at the conclusion of this event. My name is Declan Quigley, and once again I'm joined by the great Sean Kelly to bring you through to the conclusion of this stage and bring you all the action as we see the Katusha team on the front. And they are riding for that man in the centre of your screen, Luca Paolini, who took stage 3 in such impressive fashion yesterday afternoon. Luca Paolini in his debut Giro d'Italia at the ripe old age of 36. And what a successful one it's been for him already. Successful season indeed. He's taken victory in Het Nieuwsblad. And his success yesterday was the 12th of the season for the Katusha squad, so clearly they're on form, clearly he's on form, and they've taken up responsibility for setting the pace and trying to keep him in that jersey. And Sean, they say that they think that they can keep him in the jersey all the way to the 8th stage, the individual time trial on Saturday. The director sportive Valerio Piva, himself of course Giro stage winner, says they will try and keep the jersey till then. Is it possible? Is it going to be a big ask for them?
No, I think it's possible. When you look at the team, Katusha, they haven't got, of course, their big leader in this race. So they're going to try and get as much as they can out of it. And of course, yesterday they got a great stage victory, took the race leader's jersey, and they're going to try and hold on to it. And I think when you look at what's left for the rest of the week up to the time trial, it is possible for them. And they need to do that because it's a guaranteed exposure for the team, and if they can hold it for a number of days here with their stage victory yesterday of Paolini, it's going to be as successful for Katusha in this race. And then you go on into the race from there on. You're very relaxed with the team, you've got your exposure, everybody's happy, and things sometimes just go better from there on.
Yeah, in the absence of Perito Rodriguez, it's probably been a pretty good Giro so far, and maybe even a little bit better than they might have expected.
Well, it's certainly a real good Giro when they haven't got Joaquim Rodriguez here. Moreno, the other climber, the Spanish climber, he would be a very good potential for a stage victory in the mountains, but they haven't got either of those, real good climbers. So yesterday's stage was, a great victory for them so early in the race. That is important when you have a team and you're having the guarantee of a big name, a big leader that can win a stage in the mountains. When you get to the difficult mountain stages, it's always a bonus to win. And Paolini yesterday, I was surprised when I heard that he hadn't ridden the Giro up till now, which is a big surprise to me. But he's a classics man, and we see yesterday he can get over the smaller climbs, and I think it is very possible that he could hold on to the time trial.
Katusha on the front, the Garmin Sharp team riding in line astern, then the Cannondales, then the Argus Shimano, then the Colombians have decided to bring their riders up to the front. And well, it's interesting the way they're all riding in team formation, but it's pretty much everyone until they get a little bit further back in the group. And towards the back of affairs, there's Steve Cummings for BMC holding a watching brief at the back of the peloton. Just got a shot of Jaroslav Popovic as well, who's been in the wars already in this race, and he's still in there and racing well. 206 riders signed on for today's stage. The first abandon of the race, unfortunately, Sandy Cazar of Française de Jeu. He's broken a scaphoid in his wrist, and disappointment for Cazar. He loses out on the goal of finishing all 3 Grand Tours this season, as we get a sight of Popovic and all the information he's got on their stem. I often think that, can they really take in that amount of information while they're rattling along?
Well, it's quite simple because, you just put a few pointers, 6 or 8 pointers of the stage where it's going to be difficult. You mark in the kilometres, you look at your computer, you see what you have done. So you either mark it, the kilometres, these are coming up. But this is actually the official one from the race organisation, where it gives you this little card where you can put in your pocket or you can wrap around your handlebar, as we can see here with Popovic. And it gives you an idea, what's coming up. So if you're sitting on the rear a bit and the climb is coming up, more so in the middle of a stage. Today when you look at this route, there's nothing happening. Like 180 plus kilometres is really in the end where it's all going to happen. But I suppose the feed station is the thing. You can just look where that's coming up, and then you can look at your computer and you know exactly how many kilometres you're from that point. And it's just little references you just take there, and it's easy. When you get the card, you just put it around your handlebars.
How much information can you get on a stem? I suppose the longer stem you've got, the more information you can get. Okay, the group up front are working well. 7 riders up front. Let's name check them. We've got 2 riders from Française de Jeu, Johan Laban, France, Anthony Roux, also a Frenchman with the Française de Jeu team. No surprise that they're French. Julien Berard is there for AG2R, so they've managed to get in the break as per their expectations and hopes. Emmanuel Sella of Androni is the best placed overall on GC. He's just 2 minutes and 39 seconds down. The 32-year-old colourful figure in cycling. He won a stage of the Giro back in 2004, and here we have him as he goes back to the car for a little bit of a chat. Oh no, that's it's actually Armati. Yeah, it's back in the bunch. Yeah, that's the second team car. He's just on bottle collection duty. His teammate up front, Sella, 48th, as I say, at 2 minutes and 39 seconds. So he's a little bit of a threat overall. Ricardo Mestre is there for Euskaltel, Ioannis Tamaridis of Euskaltel, and Pim Lichtart of Vacansoleil. Those are the 7 riders up front whose advantage now has been whittled down. And it doesn't look like they're going to make it even over the first hill at the moment. Whether they'll pare it back to around 2.5 minutes and maybe shut it off for a little while remains to be seen. And here is Luca Paolini collecting his refreshments. Just over 100 kilometres to go. We have 2 intermediate sprints today. One with just 89 kilometres to go at Marinella di San Eufemia. And the second one comes in between the 2 final hills with 17 kilometres to go at Soriano Calabro. And remember, there's points on offer for the points competition. Also, there are time bonuses of 5 seconds, 3 seconds and 2 seconds at those 2 intermediate sprint points. Whether the overall GC contenders will be interested in contesting that remains to be seen. Those 2 intermediate sprints. We've also got the 2 climbs, as I mentioned today. Vibo Valentia with just under 30 kilometres to go is a 15-kilometre ramp. That's a 3rd category ascent. It's an average of 3%, so not particularly arduous, but there's a couple of little spikes in there that will test the legs. So it's no gimme getting over that if you're one of the bigger riders or one of the sprinters. And the second of the classified climbs in today's stage, average of 5.5% for the 2nd category ascent of Croce Ferrata, the summit of which comes with just 6 kilometres to go. Total of 12.7 kilometres of climbing in that particular hill. So that's going to be particularly demanding, Sean. 5.5% average, 12.7 kilometres of climbing. It does level off a little bit towards the top, but it is going to be a bit of a tester, especially on the back end of such a long stage.
Yes, on the back end, I think that is the important point. A long stage, and when you have a mountaintop finish, and it's almost a mountaintop finish. I know the last 7 kilometres from the final climb. Excuse me, it goes downhill a bit, but still it's going to be a very nervous final again. And we see yesterday with Huisdal throwing in an attack there, I think that will make the favourites a bit nervous there, because they'll be thinking of that, and will there be another favourite who will try something today with his team. So it's going to be a very fast one. The gradient is not difficult on the final climb. It eases off as you get further up. There is one section where it's 10%, but it's a very, very short section, and it's a big gear climb. It will be very fast. If those teams want to push on, well, they can go at a very fast rate. and because of it not being a real steep climb, it could still cause problems. If the speed is really high, well then we could see some of the big favourites getting into a little difficulty.
Yeah, we've said it before, and it bears repeating. It's not so much the course, it's how the course is raced. It's the riders that make the race.
Yes, and if you had this hill thrown in the middle of the stage, well then it would, you know, cause no problems at all, because 100 kilometres to go, for example, they would just climb up this hill at a very casual pace. But here, when it's in the very final, that's when everybody gets nervous, and all the teams are just keeping their leaders on the front in case, you know, there is a sudden attack by some of the favourites, other teams.
Okay, just over 100 kilometres to go for the 7 breakaway riders. Their gap is within 4 minutes now. Let's see how they get on after these. Stage 4 of the Giro d'Italia, taking the riders from Policastro Busantino down to Serra San Bruno, 244 kilometres, and the group up front now at 3 minutes and 50 seconds ahead of the bunch strung out behind the Katusha team, as they take responsibility for the job of making sure that Luca Paolini stays in the jersey. It's a poison chalice if you're a Gregario and you're suffering a little bit. You're absolutely thrilled to see your rider get in the jersey, and it means success for the team, and that means everybody happy. But then, of course, the next day it means that you're going to be on the front all day, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It means that they're going to be a difficult day ahead, but it depends on the racing as well, and what sort of a breakaway you're allowed to get away. You know, if you calculate before the start, you make your tactic, and you know you do not allow a big breakaway to get away, 6-7 riders maximum. Well, then you can control that. But if you allow 20 riders, well, then it gets a bit more difficult, and the team comes under pressure to keep the gap down to the minimum that they calculated to keep it at. And you know, Katusha has done well here in the start. They've allowed this group to get away. They start riding pretty quickly and never allowing a big advantage to be pulled out. And as we get closer to finish, there will other teams start to ride as well, because they will feel, well, this group can be pulled back and we can go for a stage victory. And that's the way you have to do. You have to make the calculation, you know, ride with the team as much as you just have to ride, and then take it to a situation where the other teams get interested, where if you leave the group get 15-18 minutes an advantage, a lot of the riders and teams will say, oh, well, we're never going to catch those guys, and they lose heart, and then they're not going to come in the final 60-70 kilometres to start riding on the front. So, you know, that's a calculation. You do that before the start, and when you're going to be controlling the race for a number of days, you know, you have to do that. Spare as much energy as possible, and in a 3-week tour, that's what it's all about. You know, you conserve your energy when you can, and it's very important, you know, for the certainly for the final week of the race.
2:39 is the deficit between Emanuele Sella and the race leader Luca Paolini. So he's a bit of a danger man to let away in the break. I mean, they can't pick the composition of the break before the start. It really depends on which riders attack, but they seem happy to let that one up the road. But a little bit of a concern to have Sella up there, especially as he has been very successful in the past.
Yes, well, I think he would be a man that you could not allow to take, you know, 5-6 minutes an advantage in a breakaway, going close to the end of the stage. But I don't think for the big riders, you know, they would be really concerned about Sella. You know, he's not consistent enough. I think in the past number of years he's lost that a bit, and a stage victory is where he'd be really going for. But Katusha, they want to hold on to the jersey, as we talked in the opening of our programme. For the team, it's a huge opportunity to get a stage victory first of all, and to get into race leadership, pink jersey, hold on to that for a number of days, and you know, that is going to be a great start, a great first week for the team.
Any questions coming in on Twitter? @DQ Sport is the Twitter handle. If you've any questions for myself or Sean, what are the characteristics of each category of climb? Well, it tends to vary, doesn't it, Sean? I mean, it varies from race to race. I mean, this final hill, Croce Ferrata, it might be a first category ascent in a one-day race, or it might be, you know, a third category ascent in another race, depending on where it is in the stage, as you say. It tends to move around a little bit. Yes,
depending on the category of race it is, of course. And when it's a big a national 3-week tour, you know, they don't get as high a category as in the smaller races. If you take a small race of maybe 5 days long, you take this one, Croce Ferrata, a second category today, it will probably make a first cat in like a Bessage or Tour de Mediterranean, some of those races. Also depend on the town at the top. Sometimes they donate to the organiser a bit, so maybe they get a little bit of an extra something extra, and you know, they're upgraded maybe to, you know, a category which they really shouldn't be, but because of the town supporting the race, supporting the organisers, it's rated a bit more than it actually is.
Yes, I suppose they compare to the very biggest hills that that the race is going to go over a little bit later in the race, and then sort of see how does it fit into that based on that. So it's a bit of an arbitrary one, all right, but the organisers are very experienced, and you can be sure that one way or another, regardless of the classification, the riders will certainly be feeling it today. It's interesting, talking about feeling it, just go back to that quote from David Miller yesterday on Twitter. He said, Hejidal said it wasn't even hard. He said, I found it very hard. I mean, Hejidal was... He was like a bull at a gate yesterday, wasn't he? He was just so excited, and it was really surprising to see. It was absolutely flew in the face of the character that he displayed in winning last year.
Yes, well, it made great racing in the final. You know, when a rider of Hejidal's level, you know, the defending champion goes in the attack, well, we could see immediately, you know, there was a lot of action from the other big favourites, and some of them actually were a little bit further off, because I don't think they were expecting Hejidal or any of the favourites to attack. So they were, you know, sitting that little bit further off. Cat 11s we see there. Nibali also, he was a little bit further down, but you know, they corrected the situation very quickly. But Hejidal continued on, and you know, he just kept on attacking, and you know, he really made exciting racing in the end. And of course, Miller saying that, you know, he felt it difficult, and not surprising, because you know, compared to Miller to Hejidal in the mountains, well, there's a huge difference there.
Well, it's a little bit of a shake-up in the break, and that looks like Tamarides, who has a good turn of speed, the first Greek competitor ever in the history of Giro d'Italia, who's making a bit of a name for himself, going for the intermediate sprint. Is it? No, it's a little bit... I think he's trying to get away for it, and well, obviously one or two riders aren't pulling their weight, and that's the assumption. So there's a little bit of racing going on here in the break. I would imagine the intermediate sprint could well be one of their reasons for getting away. But it's Tamarides that's drilling it on the front, and he's being called to account by the rest of the breakaway riders, so they all seem to have a little bit in the tank, but clearly not satisfied with the pace that they're setting.
Yes, it's a surprising one again. As we see yesterday, it was a surprise when we see, you know, Tabouret going out in the attack so early, and the intermediate sprint is at 80 kilometres to go, so you know, quite a long ways out here. Still, you know, just almost 15 kilometres, and they're starting to attack each other. Yeah. If the intermediate sprint haven't been changed, because sometimes they do make a change, but we haven't heard anything from our route manual here, it seems to be that it's at 80.9 kilometres before the finish. There's
a bit of team tactics going on here as well, because we've got two Francis de Joux riders and two Euskaltels, and they're playing a little bit of team tactics between them, trying to double team the rest of the break, as rider Hejidal has, well, he's working his way back on. It could well have been a natural break. It certainly is for plenty of other riders, as we see. A little bit of the hostilities have abated a little bit in the peloton, so no stress there for Hejidal. He's accompanied by several team members. So it'll be interesting to see, do we get a little mini break out of the break, if that be the phrase. Question from David Allen: why is the full stage not broadcast only the last 100 kilometres? Well, you know, it's a long stage, it's a long time out there, it's a hell of a lot of television, and a hell of a lot of helicopters you'd have to have in the air, and motorbikes, etc. Sometimes you kind of wish that we could see the first half an hour, depends on the stage in question, but sometimes they go absolutely hammer and tongs before the early break establishes itself. This one did get going relatively early, and it would sometimes be nice to be able to see a little bit of the early racing. Once things settle down a little bit, it sort of settles into a pattern that becomes quite familiar. And this, you would have to say, for the second day in a row, is not all that familiar a pattern, as we see the break splitting quite a long way out.
Well, I think the reason for splitting is, if you look at the the riders in the breakaway, Sella of course at 2:39, but the rest are much further down. I think Julien Ballard is at 9:49. Johan Lebon and Anthony Roux from Française de Giro, 13 minutes plus, 15 minutes plus, and Pim Licard 19 minutes. So I think they feel that with Sella being up here, that is causing the problem for the breakaway with any chance to succeed. So they decided, to attack and try and get into a smaller group, get rid of Sella, get him, leave him behind, and that way maybe the Katushas will just slow down a bit and allow the breakaway to pull away again. So I think that is the reason for the moment, because going at this point, just under 15 kilometres before the intermediate sprint, I don't think that would be the invitation for the riders. I think it's just that Sella is a man who is too close in general classification for comfort.
Do you reckon there might have been a little bit of a conversation with Sella, maybe?
Go back to the peloton.
Some requests made?
Yes, well, it does happen. They say when they're out in a breakaway and you're out there for 50, 60, 70 kilometres and the peloton is just leaving you hang out there, and then you start looking at the general classification. Of course, there's the team directors who, make the calculation as well, and they start giving orders to the riders and saying, well, do you have a man in the general classification? Who is the problem there? You have to try, get away in a smaller group. But they would say to him, well, you're the danger man here. You're one which the general classification men do not like you up here. So, you really should go back to the peloton. But the men in the general classification don't always agree, and then it comes to a situation as we have here on our screens.
Well, three riders up front attempting to escape the escapees. 25th of the 5th, 2002. Why was that a special date for Luca Paolini? Birth of a child, or perhaps marriage? No doubt we'll hear at some stage during the day. So riders up front now have 20 seconds of an advantage. And that's Minguez of Euskaltel is the lead Euskaltel riders there. Okay, so these riders are attempting to get out front. We'll just take this opportunity for a short break. This is Julien Bérard of AG2R, who's making his way up to the three leaders out front. And they are Johan Lebon of Française de Jeu, Pim Licard of Vacansoleil, and Ayala Minguez of the Euskaltel Euskadi team. So now four riders up front, three riders chasing, including Emanuele Sella, who we believe was the real threat in the break. And assuming that he drops back towards the peloton, and that remains to be established, then you could well see the gap for the break head out once more. And it had slipped inside 4 minutes, down to about 3:45. Now back over 4.5 minutes. The peloton took the opportunity for a natural break, got some food in, got the drinks, and they're back at the front for Katusha, setting a tempo that will draw the sting out of a lot of riders' legs. Looks relatively smooth and easy and calm and collected, but I can tell you that every pedal turn, every kilometre ridden is energy out of the bank, and is going to cost them as this stage comes to a conclusion. And of course, remember, they've got almost 3 weeks of racing to do yet. Bérard, Lebon, Minguez, Ayala and Licard up front.
Poor Sella, he's getting a raw deal here with the other teams. Of course, as I mentioned, it looks like that he was a problem. Now we have the two Euskaltel riders up in the breakaway. One Euskaltel rider and one Française de Giro, and the other two are back with Sella, of course, and he seemed to be the man that was causing the problems, they feel, but time will tell. I'm not too sure if Katusha will really allow them to take a big advantage, because they really want to hold on to the race leader's jersey, and it looks like they have everything under control.
Yeah, Sella was the big loser there. The other two riders that missed out on going across, well, they have teammates up there, so it was nicely worked by them, and presumably Sella was aware of his perhaps he was resigned to his fate once the attack started happening.
Well, I think we could see they just, walked him over, as the word in cycling, because, they go in the attack. When you have two riders from Escatel, two riders from FDJ, Française de Joux, well then it's a real difficult one for Sella. If you had just one from each team, it would be a little bit more possible for him to control it. But I think he realised very quickly that, they weren't happy with him up there. And they also must have had talked to him earlier on, because he was the problem for the breakaway, not being allowed to pull out a much bigger advantage, and he's the one is paying the price. But unfortunately in the general classification, that's what they feel, that he's the one who's causing the peloton to keep quite a strong pace and not them allowing them to take a much bigger advantage.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got 4 riders and they're attacking in turn, one every 4th time, and it's Sella that has to chase down every single time, then Sella isn't going to last too long. And I suspect he just said, well, that's enough. They've decided Euskaltel will be happy enough. They've got a rider up there. Française de Joux will be happy enough. They've got a rider up there. Vacansoleil's Pim Lichtart, good trackman in his time. National champion in 2011 of the Netherlands. And 5th in Tour of Belgium also in that year, so it's a pretty good year. He's 5th in Tour of Limburg this year, so he obviously has good legs coming out of the winter. And Lichtart is showing the jersey for Vacansoleil with some facility today. 19 minutes and 55 seconds behind in general classification, so not a threat. Neither indeed is Le Bon at 13 minutes and 51 seconds. Julien Bérard is 9 minutes and 49 seconds behind. And Ayala Minguez is fully 22 minutes behind. 199th out of the 206 riders still left in Giro d'Italia. Let's just take you through the jersey classification situation. We've got Luca Paolini, who has a 17-second advantage over Bradley Wiggins of the Sky team. And Rigoberto Urán, also of Sky, is on the same time. Bennett Inchausti of Movistar at 26 seconds. Vincenzo Nibali at a handy 31 seconds, so he hasn't given up too much time to Bradley Wiggins. Didn't gain any time yesterday. Didn't show himself, as we half expected that he might go on the attack, but it was Ryder Hagedal that surprised everyone. And Mauro Sant'Ambrogio, 39 seconds in arrears for Vinny Fantini in 11th position of the general classification. Contenders, Cadel Evans also handily placed there, 42 seconds behind Paolini in 12th. And Robert Hessink, who had his difficulties yesterday, has managed to survive that crash on that hairpin laid on. That cost Scarponi dear, also cost Kruijswijk, his Blanco teammate, a big chunk of time, about 50-odd seconds. But Robert Hessink managed to hang on in the group, and he's now 45 seconds in arrears on GC. Meanwhile, looking at the other jersey contenders, as I said, Luca Paolini leads the points competition by 1 point from Mark Cavendish. So Paolini has the Maglia Rosa. It's Mark Cavendish, therefore, that wears the red jersey for the second day in succession. And it'll be interesting to see perhaps whether Mark Cavendish has a thought about maybe getting involved in the intermediate sprints just to get back in front in that jersey, in that points jersey competition, Sean.
Well, it's possible that he might have pick up some points. We will see in the first number of days in this race, if Mark Cavendish is really going for the points classification outright. That is the question, and that also means, is he going to go all the way in this Giro? Because we see some of the sprinters, they go so far in a race like this, and then they just pull out the race with the view of the Tour de France. So it will be interesting. We will see it when the opportunity comes. There's a number of points to be collected for the points jersey in the immediate sprints. I think then we will see. It will give an indicator if he's really interested in this overall classification for the end of the race.
Yeah, to give us an indication of whether he's going to be there on the third week. Although in fairness, there's some good sprint opportunities there, on the third week, and he says he's going to stay, and he stayed last year. So Mark Cavendish, if he says he's going to hang on, you've got to believe him. You've got to take his word for that one. And how many drinks? It's a hardy perennial, this question. Spike Pitt is asking how many drinks and what sort are carried in the cars. If a 9-man team, 10 to 15 drinks each on a hot day. Yeah, absolutely. You can get through lots and lots of bottles. And in terms of what drinks. Sometimes they have water, sometimes they have energy drinks, so there's a combination, and different riders need different things, and they need them at different times during the race.
Yes, and you know, different riders need different drink, and some riders like to take a lot of water, other riders take the energy drinks, but in the rear of the car, that is the problem in the stage races. When it's very warm, they have these fridge boxes which take up a lot of space, and you know, a lot of the time they're just about room for the mechanic in the rear, because with the fridge boxes being quite bulky and the weather conditions warm. And of course, when they go to the feed station as well, the team cars there, they have the estate car, so they have extra fridge boxes, and they can make the change there as they go through the feeding station, because they would, you know, be able to you know, top up their fridges, or just exchange and take on a full fridge of fresh bottles.
Yeah, if you've ever wondered why they have cars, and there is a rule on the maximum height of a vehicle in the peloton, because you might have thought that there'd be a value in having a van in there.
Yes, well, of course, with the station wagons that they have, the estate cars, and there's plenty of room in them, you know. With the masseurs that go to the feed station as well, of course, they're just 2 people in the car, so they have quite a lot of room, and they would have quite a stock of fresh cold drink.
Big enough. Some people perhaps a little less concerned with events happening on the road, but enjoying the wonderful weather out on the southern Italian coast, heading down towards the very tip of the boot. Look at all those electricity generating windmills in the background. Mark Cavendish getting the food in, the aforementioned, and alongside his Olympic road race teammate Bradley Wiggins. Meanwhile, Luca Paolini goes back for a chat. He's got to be satisfied the way things are going at the moment. The gap has gone out to 5 minutes. But that's not going to be a concern for Paolini, because the best place of the riders up front, well, of the 3 riders up front, of course, there are riders in between now, but they're working their way back towards the peloton. But of the four riders, I should say, Barron, Le Bon, Minguez Ayala and Lichtart, best placed of these is around about 9 minutes down. 9 minutes and 49 seconds for Julien Berard. So that's not a concern for him at the moment. Actually, speaking about bottles and what you drink and how many bottles you need to take on during the day, there's a great blog that I picked up overnight. Cameron Worf of the Cannondale team, who was very active on the first stage. Well, he's sick now. He's actually picked up a bit of a bug, and he had a free day off yesterday from team duties with his team, but he decided late on, before they came to the final hill, that he would go back and get the bottles. And he said it was such a battle. The race was on, the peloton was lined out, and he went back to get the bottles, and had to really struggle to get them back up to his teammates, and ended up without a bottle himself, because he'd given one of the energy drink bottles away to one of his teammates. Okay, so it's Lichtart that takes the intermediate sprint points, and the 5 seconds on offer with that. Not that that's really of any relevance to him, not really all that seriously contested, so Lichtart it was that showed the interest, and he's the man that takes the points across the line there. Up front, Katusha continue to do the work, tapping out the rhythm. They're all lined out on the front. Paolini is working his way back up from the back. He'll be back up towards the front very shortly. We'll take this opportunity for a short break. So that's the 3 riders in between the 4 riders up front: Emanuele Sella, Ioannis Tamaridis and Anthony Roux. So we get a shot of Cavendish and Wigo engaged in conversation. Former Madison teammates on the track, of course, and former teammates at Sky Pro Cycling last season. How would you judge the move so far for Cavendish? I mean, would you have felt that he had to get away from Sky because they were so orientated towards general classification for the Grand Tours? So, you know, you have to think, well, it was a good move for him to get away from Sky Pro Cycling. Has it been a successful move so far? Is it too early to judge?
Well, I think it's early to judge. It looked a real good move in the earlier part of the season when he started winning races. in the opening races of the year, and then he had a little bit of a quiet time. He was, some of the races, the semi-classics, let's call them. Curran versus Curran, of course, was cancelled, but then we had Skelter Prize where it didn't work out well for them. But this Giro, it started off really well, winning his stage, getting the pink jersey, and it goes on from here. If he can, get another stage or get 2 more stages, 3-stage victory out of the Giro, well, then it will be a real good first part of the season for him. And then the Tour of France, of course, will be the big objective for the team. It's difficult in a team like Sky. We see last year when they're built around a potential winner, and the winner it was in the Tour of France last year. You have to have a strong team that can control the race, and he suffered a bit for that, but still won 3 stages in the Tour of France, which was amazing. I think if he had a lead-out team last year totally around him, well, he would have won many more stages. And I have said to some of the journalists, Cavendish, they asked the question, what do you think for the Tour de France? Well, if you want to make it interesting, you should really put him into the Tour de France on his own without a team. That way, we will see interesting sprints, because with a big lead-out train, he is such an explosive one in the final 200 metres. Nobody can get near him if he get that lead out. We did see in the first stage here where it got a bit difficult for Omega Pharma Quick-Step in the final, and in the very end with Stegman's having problems, he lost a little bit of ground but rectified it very well and won a magnificent sprint. So he is so strong with a lead out train. I think some of the sprint stages can get a bit boring if you have a super lead out train.
Do you think other teams ever actively try and get involved to stop a particular rider? Do you think someone would sacrifice his own chances as a team rider? Less about leading out his own rider and more about trying to get involved to stymie the chances of...
Well, if you've got a team with a good sprinter, and you have got the lead-out men, and they feel Mark Cavendish is too fast for their man, well then if you have a technical run-in, that's where you have to be careful, because they can get between the train in the top 5 or 10 riders, and they can get in front of Cavendish, leave a gap in the corner suddenly, and that's something you always have to be aware of. But that's where the team experience comes in. If you have some very good lead-out men who know what to do in the final kilometres, well then they can see that coming before it happens. So you have to be real careful. But
so it wouldn't actually be dirty, and it wouldn't be dangerous, but it would definitely impede Cavendish.
Well, it's a tactic. It's it's a legitimate tactic, and when you're coming to a stage finish with Mark Cavendish, and he has a number of riders on the front, and they're really keeping the pace high, and you make the calculation, your best man in the team against Cavendish, he's not going to be able to match Cavendish in the final burst to the line. So you can work that tactic and try and just cause a gap there, leave the wheel go in front of you. By doing that, well, you have some chance of winning. And we've seen it in the past in the Tour of France. We've seen it, I think it was with Hushoft and some of his teammates. They did it, real good in the Tour of France. I think it was about 2 years ago.
Nice one in on Twitter. Albert Fishwick says, do you think Cav was asking Wigo what he thought about Froome being leader for the Tour? Well, I wouldn't like to speculate on that. Now, speaking of Froome and Wigo, that story refused to go away. David Brailsford, well, he's probably put a nail in it for a little while by announcing yesterday that Chris Froome was absolutely, categorically and definitively the race leader of the Sky Pro Cycling squad for the Tour de France this year. The question is, do you think Bradley Wiggins, if he wins the Giro d'Italia, or even if he doesn't, do you think he'll ride the Tour de France in support of Chris Froome?
Well, I think, yes, he will ride the Tour de France, and if Brailsford said that, it's going to be the team built around Chris Froome in the Tour, well, then I think we have to take that as an agreement now. But again, time will tell. But when you look at the situation, I think Wiggins, depending on what happens in this Giro, if he wins the Giro, I think it will, sort things out pretty well. And for me, I would not be surprised that Christopher Froome gets full support from the team in the Tour de France then. Do
you think that would affect his status as a great champion if he becomes a super domestique if Bradley Wiggins was to ride as a super domestique?
Well, first of all, when you say that Chris Froome is the leader, you go into the Tour de France and you have the two men there, and Bradley Wiggins is not going to be a domestique right from the beginning in the Tour de France, because Sky, first of all, they have a team that they can look after the two men for the first number of stages, the first week of racing to the first time trial, and then you see in the time trial, because you never know what way a rider can react, and sometimes they can start getting into difficulty. So within Sky they have two great cars to play, and you work with them to a certain point, and then when you get into the big mountain stages, when the team maybe is in a little bit more difficulty, it's there where Bradley Wiggins' service might be needed, and that's when we will see really if the agreement is that Chris Froome is the main man in the Tour de France, because you get into a situation where one have to sacrifice his chances a bit for the other one, and then you will see very quickly and very clearly.
Speaking of service, Greg Abol goes back, and I think for once the magic spanner is actually a spanner, because they're making some serious adjustments there to his seat cluster. Got the Allen key out, whether they're moving the saddle forward, back, up or down. I don't think it was a saddle height adjustment. I think it's very much just perhaps just tightening it up. Might have come a little bit loose.
Yes, it looked like it's not the saddle height, but adjusting the saddle, the level of the saddle. It looks like that he's changing a bit. Maybe it's come a little bit loose, and he feels that the saddle has picked up a bit on the front, or maybe it doesn't feel comfortable. But it's certainly this not the saddle height there.
And question in. Apologies, a lot of these questions are inevitably about Sky Pro Cycling. They are the preeminent squad in world cycling, and obviously so many fans in the English-speaking world are looking out to see what they're doing and what they're about. So lots of questions about Sky Pro Cycling. They're very much not the only team in the Pro Peloton, but who's going to lead Sky Pro Cycling for the Vuelta? Well, that is another good question. Perhaps Richie Porte. I think he seems to be giving his head a little more often these days.
Well, of course, they have such a depth in the Sky team, with Richie Porte riding so strong in the beginning of season, winning Paris-Nice impressively, and he's certainly a rider of the future for a big tour, and I'd not be surprised if the end of the season that, depending also what happened this Giro, what happened in the Tour de France, how it works out for Sky and their two big leaders, and then I think you can look at the Vuelta, Tour of Spain later on. If both of them are successful in two big tours, well then Richie Porte could be the leader for the Vuelta.
Meanwhile, back in the peloton, it's food time. Mattia Gavazzi getting the gels in, and Luca Paolini seems very relaxed. He was riding at the back of his train of riders, but a little bit risky, I think, perhaps to be back in the group like that. But it's such a mentally draining experience. 3 weeks of racing, and Paolini is a very experienced rider, and he'll just take the odd opportunity here and there. It is a little bit of a risk, I suppose, for the... Oh, and look at that. Vieira. No panic there. What's the rule when you see a bottle on the road? Ride over it. Well, he managed to just dink around it with any difficulty there. Kenny de Haas, the sprinter for Lotto Belisol, on bottle duty at the moment. Question is, who can get over these hills, and how big the group will be at the conclusion of today's activities. 2 classified climbs. 3rd category ascent of Vibo Valentia, the summit of which coming with 29 kilometers to go, and the final mountain, Croce Ferrata, 12.7 kilometer ascent, the top coming with 6 kilometers to go. And how big will the group be as it winds its way down towards Serra San Bruno? Sean, you were having a little look at the... well, we'll chat about that in a bit. I think we're going to just go to a break very shortly as the Vini Fantini riders get the bottles in. 4 minutes and 44 seconds, so it's stabilised, heading up towards 5 minutes between the 4 riders up front and the bunch behind. Ryder Hejjedal, I should say, of the Garmin Sharp team, also looking very relaxed as the peloton winds its way towards the conclusion of today's fourth stage of the Giro d'Italia. Serra San Bruno is the target for the riders, and the reigning champion has been a professional a long time. 7 professional victories in total in one stage of the Giro. It's meagre pickings, really. He's taken a long time to really discover his true ability. Targeted the Giro last year in a big way. Didn't tell anyone about it. Didn't tell anyone until about the last week that he was going to be a real serious overall contender, and managed to come up with the goods in the final time trial. And what a wonderful performance it was for Ryder Hejjedal to emerge as a Grand Tour contender in his 30s. Another shot of the information that the riders can call on, and indeed the data that's been logged by his GPS unit on his bars as riders continue to take a natural break. So clearly you can tell by the way the peloton is spread across the road that it's a relatively relaxed pace at the moment. Paolini goes back for a chat, chooses not to communicate with his team over the radio, and picks up a bottle. Interesting, it's not a beat-on. And Paolini is indeed, I think he might have had one of those bottles. Interesting that it isn't in a beat-on, really, isn't it? 4 riders up front continue to toil away. Minguez Ayala of the Euskaltel squad, Johan Le Bon of Française de Jeu, Julien Berard of AG Tour, and this man Pim Lichtart of the Vacon Soleil squad. Lichtart, as I said, national champion of 2011 in Belgium. Julien Berard, 25-year-old Frenchman, currently 115th at 9 minutes and 49 seconds. He's the AG2R. And Johan Le Bon on screen there is 22 years of age, and clearly a rider with a great future. He was second in Trobre-Léon just a few weeks ago, what they call the mini Paris-Roubaix, on dirt roads. Very different roads to the roads that he's encountering today in the Giro d'Italia, but clearly he's got some good form. He's also 4th in 3 days of Japan this year, so Johan Le Bon has come into the pro peloton and come into Giro d'Italia with good legs and obviously some decent ability on the bike. Damien Barrett is asking a question. Yesterday I said that the climbers struggled on the descents. It's a bit of a paradox. Are they too light to go as fast as the bigger riders, Sean?
Well, when you get this the style of finish yesterday, you get very good descenders, and Paolini, we could see that he's a real good finisher. We did talk about that yesterday, but it's really that the big general classification riders, they don't want to take the risk on the descent, because you take a bit too much risk and then you run into a problem. We see Scarponi yesterday, losing a minute. It's a lot to lose in the earlier days of a Giro. So I think a lot of the other favourites, Nibali for example, we never see him making any move yesterday, so he was playing safety and just following the other favourites down, as was Bradley Wiggins.
Yeah, so some climbers are good descenders. Nibali is a good descender. I mean, yes, and he's obviously a top climber. But the likes of Pozzovivo, maybe would,
well, yes, a lot of the Colombian riders are, not good descenders, as a lot of the climbers, a number of the climbers are not great descenders. I think we talked about Nibali yesterday. He can descend so well, but he descends so well. He shows his descending ability, his descending qualities big time when he's with a lot of riders who are not maybe prepared to take the risk, or not good descenders. If you put the sprinters with Nibali at the top of a climb, for example, as we had yesterday, and do the descent, well, they could go down as fast as Nibali without any problem. But of course, they're never there in the very final, right, because when you have a climb beforehand, so you're making the calculation against riders who maybe don't want to take the risk, and a number of them also who are not great descenders. And it's the case whether the climbers, there's always a number of them who do not like descent, who are not good descenders, where the sprinters, 99% of the sprinters can pretty much go downhill very fast.
Yeah, Nibali has this fantastic reputation as a descender, Samuel Sanchez as well, but yes, it's interesting. They may not necessarily be the best descenders in the peloton. Maybe they should, one year, I think 87, the year that Roach won, they had a downhill time trial off the Poggio, which Roach won. maybe they should revisit that. Do you think there'd be plenty of riders up for the idea of a downhill time trial?
No, I don't think there'd be plenty more for it.
One or two.
Certainly you'd get a very small percentage would be in favour of the teams also as well. They wouldn't be really looking forward to that. There's enough of downhill, I think, in this Giro when you look at the stages, and we had one already very early yesterday, which was a spectacular final, the downhill, and there's many more to come in this race, and it's not always in the very final that you're going to get a spectacular downhill. If you get a condition where they get some wet roads, that's where Nibali can be dangerous, and he can push on so fast on the wet streets, and that's where some of the general classification men do not like at all. In the dry conditions yesterday, we see so many riders falling. When you go really at the limit, well, then you're going to get that situation where some people will get the line wrong and down they go.
Well, what does it take to be a descender? You were obviously one of the best descenders, and indeed a famous descent of the Poggio. Produced a great victory for yourself in Milan San Remo, so I mean, you had a great reputation as a descender. Have you any idea what quality in a rider it takes to be a descender?
Well, I think bike handling is very important, but no fear is the bigger one.
Right.
When you're going downhill, it's like in motor racing. I do not know a lot about motor racing, but I've talked to some people and they say, well, if you want to test a driver how he can drive a car, get him to drive downhill, and that's where you will see very quickly how good he is. And biking is the same. If you haven't got any fear, well, then you can go downhill so well. Of course you have got to have the qualities and the experience about getting your line into the corners, but it seems to be that the climbers, there's a lot of them who do not like the downhills, and they just struggle that little bit.
I think he would have been a pretty good racing driver, Rashawn, no doubt about it. Do the team radios operate on different frequencies? Are they encrypted, or can each team listen in on their competitors' chat? Could well be the reason that Paolini was back at his team car there, chatting away, rather than choosing to go out over the radio.
Well, that is something, yes, from my own experience doing the races with the team, where in the past, of course, now it's not as much because radios are limited to the bigger races, but you would wonder in some of the events, like, can the team scan your frequency and get the information? So sometimes we do see the riders coming back, but it's an interesting one, and I think it probably does happen, I think, on occasions, but it's only very rare.
So, interesting development here up front. The Katusha riders have been given a little bit of help with the pace setting by the Vini Fantini squad. They've put a couple of riders on the front, and no doubt that comes as great relief to Luca Paolini and crew. 3 minutes and 51 seconds the gap now between the break up front, so it's been very, very nicely managed and controlled. This is Rafael Andreato, the Brazilian rider with the Vini Fantini Italia squad. And his teammate Francesco Kiki is just behind, a galloper for the team, as we see a crash, and the Amiga Pharma Quick-Step squad are affected. A couple of riders there.
Kaisa.
Let's say, yeah, Elio Kaisa is in there. Stegemans is stopped by the side of the road, and Brambilla, Gianluca Brambilla, they might have hoped that they could get him to the finish today, but Brambilla has come to grief. No doubt he'll be able to get back into the peloton, but that's moments lapse in concentration. The peloton has been cruising along at a very controlled pace, but remember, they've been out there for a while now, and these problems, it's easy to have an Eros Kopecky of the Movistar team. It gets a front wheel, and looks like his tub had rolled there. That can happen in the crash as much as anything. So no great panic or alarm for Eros Kopecky. And indeed, his tub hadn't rolled, so I'm not exactly sure what I saw there, but he's not going to have low profile. Let's get a side of it. Right in the middle, and whoa, that was a pretty spectacular one. And they go down like dominoes. Riders caught behind. Kopecky, I think he might have got front and rear wheels there, because he hasn't got the deep section carbon wheels in now. 145th on general classification.
it looks like a bike change there. We do not see the frame number, so I think he's just changed to his spare bike, and it's just a lack of concentration here. We can see the way the peloton is rolling along. We've seen a number of shots there while they're having a chat there. It's relaxed times, and sometimes you just take your eye off it, and they slow up in front, and it looked like they just touched wheels and down they went.
Any reason why Vinny Fantini might be setting the pace, John?
Well, I think they probably have somebody who they feel get over the climbs, and that is the interesting one again today. This final 40 kilometres with the 2 hills thrown in. They probably feel that they have a rider capable of getting over the climbs with the main group. It should be a much bigger group today, but again, it depends on how fast they go. So it seems like they have confidence in some of the riders capable of getting a stage victory. And when you look at the history here, the first climb we're going to go over at the at what I think it's about 40 kilometres from the finish. Yes, 39.2 kilometres from the finish, and we've had a finish here before. A stage finish actually, and it's about 10 years ago, and Robbie McEwen won here ahead of Cipollini and Pataki. So and there was the start of Robbie McEwen's he won 12 stages at the Giro, and he had the pink jersey for 2 days, but that was one of his first, if not his first victory, if I remember rightly. So it's not going to be too difficult, the first climb, the Vivo Valentina. So it should be no problem for a big group of riders to get through that. The final one is the one, the Croce. Will there be many riders to finish? But that depends on what sort of teams get involved in the pace setting, and it could be, it could turn out more difficult than it looks on paper.
So now riders working their way back to the peloton after that spill and that delay for many riders. Spill for a few, delay for many, and they're working their way back up through the cars and back up onto the tail of the peloton, which is being led by the Vinny Fantini trio, with the Katushas in line astern behind them, with Luca Paolini safely ensconced in the peloton, just over 3 minutes behind the leaders up front. Contender, there's Nibali nicely placed 31 seconds behind Luca Paolini. And the skies now coming to the fore. Obviously Bradley Wiggins is perhaps just got a little bit of a rattle because of that accident, and said, well, no, look, we've got to go up front. And it's a long day in the saddle, and riders need to stretch the legs a bit. Pozzato it is. And Steele's a little chat with Steve Cummings. Meanwhile, the riders out front continue to tap out a steady rhythm. It's Lichtart, Berard, Le Bon, and Minguez Ayala. And it looks as if their days are numbered. The peloton have decided that they're going to step it up and try and close this one down early. Do you think it's too early to commit to that piece of speculation, or do you think it's possible that it will yo-yo again and work its way back out?
Well, we can see it's heating up already.
Yeah.
I think, the peloton had a calculation really well. Katusha just kept on, keeping a pace at the front and keeping the advantage where... there's always some teams who feel they can do something in the end of this stage and they can get something out of a stage victory. And, Vinny Fantini are the ones who are taking it up over the last number of kilometres. And now we're coming to the point again where it starts to, get to the climbs, and team positioning is important. And we can see here Sky Team, Movistar appearing, a lot of teams, of course Katusha will be there as well. And the pace will just up and up, and this 2:20 advantage still with just under 50 kilometres to go. Unfortunately, the breakaway, is not going to succeed to get to the finish today. And it's a bit of a familiar sight in the early days of the Tour of France, depending on who's race leader, and that difficult for the breakaways to succeed, and that goes on for a number of days until we get a point where riders are a long ways down. They get 8 and 10 minutes down, and if you get riders with that plus 10 minutes down in general classification, then they're allowed to take a much bigger advantage. But with Katusha wanting to hold the jersey here, they were taking no risk at all in the stage today. Right from the beginning when the breakaway went, they always kept the lead on the advantage given to the breakaway.
Back in the peloton, riders have made their way back in. That's Mattia Gavazzi. He's been at the back a little bit. We see Ryder Hagedal has seems very relaxed about making his way up front. We noticed the Blanco team had just arrived at the front. No doubt Robert Gesink in tow there. Bradley Wiggins is up the front for Sky, but Ryder Hagedal seems relaxed enough.
Yes,
clearly
his teammate doesn't look as relaxed. And Avodaskas, he's looking around there, and he's giving him, we can see here once again he's trying to just take him to the front because he knows that the position they're in at the moment because of crashes, as we've seen, one just a number of kilometres down the road, but getting to the stage where he needs to move up a bit. And sometimes you have guys who are very relaxed, too much relaxed at times. They'll just hang around too far back, and it's a problem for the team, the domestiques in the team, because if there's a problem at the end of the day and they lose a bit of time, a lot of the time it's not the domestiques that get the hard time from the leader who gets the hard time from the director sportive. It's the domestiques. Well, why didn't you look after them? Why didn't you take them to the front? And I think Navadaska is a little bit concerned there at the moment.
Yeah. So Hagedal, it's all easy because he gets an armchair ride to the front, but Navadaskis has to try and weave his way through. And of course, it looks the road's a little bit tight, a little bit difficult. Vinny Fantini leading affairs. Colombia have come to the fore as well. Perhaps they fancy doing a little bit of something as the road starts to rise, and they arrive onto the third category ascent of Vibo Valentia. 15 kilometers in total of a ramp up here. They hit the summit of this with 29 kilometers to go. Last kilometer, 1.1 kilometers, are around about 6 to 7%. So it does ramp up a little bit towards the end. It's got a little bit of a descent just before that final kilometer. Otherwise, it's a fairly steady one, but it'll still take it out of the legs. It'll definitely take it out of the legs of these riders, and their advantage now 1 minute and 41 seconds. So they'll do well indeed to at least stay out front, even to the top of this third category ascent. And talking about Ryder Hagedal, was he crazy or smart yesterday? The debate rages on. Jonathan Vaughters was vocal on Twitter. He was saying that Charlie Wegelius, who's in the Garmin Sharp team car, he's the DS for this race, he sent Hagedal up front. He said there was no wind penalty on a sheltered descent, so he might as well throw a few shapes. That really he wasn't wasting a whole lot more energy than the other riders behind.
Well, that is quite true on the descent. You can push on if you're a good descender, and you do not burn a lot of energy by doing that, but you take the risk, because if you're the rider leading down the descent, well, you have to make the calculation how tight the corner is, and sometimes you can get that a little bit wrong, and you can get into a bit of difficulty if you're following a rider down the descent, and you're in third, fourth position in that group of main favourites. You just leave 2-3 bike lengths of the wheel in front of you, and you follow down. You can see as they go into the corner, you can see the line they're taking, the reaction they have going into the corner, so you can make the calculation how tight the corner is. So from experience, I feel it's better to follow a good descender down than to try and make the pace and really be pushing it on and be in the leading position.
We're down towards the southern tip of Italy, not far from Sicily when they get to the finish here, so no surprise that Vincenzo Nibali has plenty of support out on the road today. Julien Berard on bottle duty for AG2R. What am I saying? He's collecting bottles for himself. Bottle duty for the lead of the race. 1 minute and 40 seconds. They must be getting that sinking feeling. 1:22 the GPS is telling us now it's down to. So the chalkboard struggling to catch up with the reality of affairs. And up front it's Lidgaard that sets the pace, as Paolini has made his way to the front and now needs to remain ever vigilant.
And as we can see, the Vinny Fantini team, Vinny Fantini Italia. Of course, Garzelli there, we can see him just in about 4th, 5th position. Possibly that the finish for him today, he feels he can do something. A past winner of the race and won winner of the mountain classification a number of times. So this style of finish, maybe they feel that it's not the real steep ones, but a difficult final kilometres, and possibly Stefano Garzelli from the team, he's the man maybe they're just preparing for today.
Yeah, Garzelli won Giro d'Italia in 2000. He's taken a total of 8 stage victories in the Giro, and he is the oldest man in the race. So if he was to manage to take a stage victory at 39 years of age, it would be no mean a feat indeed. Very much in the Indian summer of a long and distinguished career. And Garzelli clearly is fancies his chances, and he's told the Vini Fantini team, we're all riding today. What about the riders that lost out yesterday, Sean? AG2R were conspicuous by their absence in that leading group at the conclusion of affairs. Pozzovivo and Betancourt, two diminutive climbers. Pozzovivo, the Italian, came over from the Colnago squad this year, and Betancourt, the young Colombian that they've signed, who we saw the interview with at the start of today's broadcast. Both expected to do plenty in this race, but they missed that split, and now they're already chasing the race. And man, you wouldn't expect that either of them is going to have a lot in the individual time trials.
Well, the individual time trial is always going to be a struggle for them. They're not good time trialists, and they certainly don't want to lose time in stage like yesterday. And you know, the time we could see them yesterday, they have difficulty to follow the groups coming down the climb, and both of them lost 50 seconds. We see Betancourt, he ran off a bit. He was a bit ahead of Pozzovivo, and just missed a corner a bit and had to get off his bike and slip back a bit into another group. So 50 seconds, a big time loss for them, because in the time trial they're going to lose many minutes. So in the big mountain stages, that's where they will try and pull back that, but they would not they would not like the stage yesterday, that final run. They would have known that it was going to be difficult, and they're not good ascenders. Both of them, we could see they were under difficulty just trying to stay with the groups that they were in yesterday. Not alone, they were not in the leading group, but they were in the following group, and really on the limit trying to stay there.
Well, Mingus Ayala goes to the front, but you can see he took on a lot of bottles. So, well, I did say that Berard wasn't on bottle duty for the team, but Mingus Ayala certainly is collecting plenty of bottles, because the gap now that is down to within 55 seconds. So presumably when the group catches Mingus Ayala, he'll be right at the front of the bunch and be able to distribute bottles to the Euskaltel team. So it's an interesting piece of teamwork there. What about Sant'Ambrogio of Vini Fantini? He went well yesterday to finish 4th, now 28 years of age. Yes. 11th overall, right there?
Yes, very much there. And when you see him there yesterday, it's a good pointer, because he's in good shape, and we did see on the climbs yesterday there were a lot of action, and it really pushed on. So to be up there, he had to be very much to the fore as they came over the final climb of the day, and then continued on and finished as you said, 4th in the stage. Garzelli as well yesterday, he finished not too far off. De Luca as well. It's difficult to see or to know for the moment how well those guys are going, but they have a good number of riders there who could stay in this group. But as you said, Sant'Ambrogio, he was a real good performance yesterday, finishing 4th on the stage.
Well, Lichtard and Laban have been jettisoned, as up front we see a little bit of activity coming from Mingus Ayala, and at the front it's Julien Berard who's decided to strike for glory. He's moved on ahead, not satisfied with the pace, and clearly feels he can do a little bit more. Mingus Ayala is
overloaded.
Yeah, he's carrying a lot of weight. He's not quite as light as he would like to be on the and it makes a difference, right?
Well, it certainly makes a difference, and it's the time you feel it when you start going uphill and it starts to push on, quite fast. Well, then that's where the little bit of extra weight it does really drag you down, and when you have a number of bottles stuffed down your jersey, you're certainly going to feel it.
Steve Edwards is asking, my wife asked, do all the teams carry a pink helmet in case they take the lead? Well, yeah, they absolutely do. Well, certainly the helmet manufacturers would bring plenty of examples of their helmets, different sizes, and have them branded up for the team, etc., so that if one of their riders gets into the Maglia Rosa, that they're able to brand them up and get them nicely color-coded and matched. So, yes, and all the teams... They bring pink handlebar tape and pink shoes and every possible conceivable extra accessory in the possible eventuality that they end up in the lead of the race. And of course the organisers of the race have the facility to put the logos of each of the teams onto the pink jersey overnight. So they get they're presented with one jersey on the podium, and then they get the proper jersey, you might say, in the morning, which has all the logos, and they have a little van that travels around and is able to produce the jerseys overnight. And Kurt Edmonds is asking, when the riders change bikes, is the timing chip thing already fitted to the spare bike? What about race numbers not on the spare bike? Well, they've got numbers pinned to their jerseys. And they don't have a number on the bike, and they don't have the timing chip at that point, but there is the finish line camera, so they do have the they can consult that. So if the timing chip hasn't picked up the rider, they can just go through and scan through the photographs, and the rider does have the numbers on his jersey, so they should be able to pick it up at the end without any difficulty. Might slow up the process of giving you full and final GC times, but no real difficulty there. What is that attached? It looks like he's picked up a little bit of wood. It's an extraordinary addition to his frame. Pim Lichtart, I wonder, I'm sure he's aware of it. He can probably feel it as the crank goes round and the pedal. He can possibly even feel it with his shoe, but he has a little look down, so no doubt he's aware of it, but it doesn't seem to be impeding his progress.
Yes, surprising. I think we could see them. He was stopped pedaling for a moment, so he knows it's there, and I'm surprised he's not just putting down his hand and pulling it out, because that's normally what the riders do. They can do that with, no problem at all.
Doesn't look too difficult. Could he go back to his car? How close is his car to him? That's the question, I suppose. And clearly it's maximum attack at the moment for the riders. Lichtart would like to try and hang on out front as long as possible, but whether he can make it to the front of the grid, it looks as if they're actually making progress, and that's an indication of why Lichtart isn't going back to or reaching down, because he doesn't really have the opportunity to take any time. But they've made their way back to these riders up front, and just as I say it, he's lost all the bottles.
Yes, well,
he throw them all away?
He certainly have got rid of the extra weight.
But he hasn't drunk them, has he? And it looks as if Berard has shot his bolt. Bridge too far for him, and didn't have the pace. And look at this, Minguez Ayala has changed tactics. His expectation was he was going to be back in the bunch, and now he's been told to go ahead. Meanwhile, the group behind is being controlled nicely by Vinny Fantini. Minguez Ayala, now 24 years of age. He's been with Euskaltel since 2010, and with the feeder team Orbea Oreca SDA for a couple of seasons before that. So very much part of the Euskaltel Academy. And I wonder how he got his base layer ripped. Maybe it's his favourite one. He's had it for 10 years or something.
Need to change it.
Yeah, he's not thinking too hard about it at the moment. He's got plenty of ventilation out of it, that's for sure. That's what he wants going up this hill. Too many results so far this year. These meagre results, really. His best results: 17th in Grand Prix of Quebec, 24th in Tour of Catalonia last year. It's a reasonable effort, nothing too exceptional about it. 16th in Grand Piedmont. And he's making a bit of a name for himself at the moment, and clearly a man who likes it when the road goes upwards. 26 seconds to the riders behind, and he's maintaining the gap to the riders in front at 52 seconds. So there's every chance that if he's able to maintain this sort of tempo, that he could. Has he got a fighter's chance of actually hanging out front at the top of the hill?
Well, I think it will all depend on the peloton, what way they react. It's they who decide, if they just continue on making a steady pace, and with the breakaway totally blown to pieces, and one man out of the lead, they're going to make the calculation. The mountain prize at 39 kilometres to the finish is a long ways out, so they might allow him just to hang out there. But again, if the nervousness starts to sit into the peloton, well, then the pace will be up, and that's where he still have another 10 kilometres to go to the mountaintops, so it's a long ways out.
Long way to go. It's going to be difficult for him. Cloudy it is, as you saw at the stage finish. Temperature quite a bit lower than it was at the stage start. Plenty of wind out there, so it's going to be different conditions for the riders as they head towards the finish in Serra San Bruno. Steve Cummings at the group decides to move up and over a couple of riders that are struggling. So clearly Cummings is
giving up his place.
Yeah, I thought he owned the back. Yeah. He seems to be in control of the situation at the moment in terms of his energy, so that's good to see that Steve Cummings is bringing good legs to the Giro. Not such good legs, you'd have to say, for Davide Apollonio. And he's not too keen on... Well, he'd be very keen, I suppose, if he could, but he's just not able to hang on in there. And that's a bit of a worry, because there's a long way to go to the finish and another hill to climb after this, with fully, about 30 miles to go in this race. Steve Cummings of the BMC team riding in the service of Cadel Evans, who did a great salvage ride yesterday, you'd have to say. Was cut out a little bit when rider Hejadal went on the attack. But Cadel Evans managed to descend like the superstar ex-mountain biker that he is. A few comments on Twitter about, we were talking earlier about descending, and suggestions that if you're an ex-mountain biker, you're probably a good descender. I'm not sure it always follows, but certainly Cadel Evans is not afraid of them. And he descended like a stone, got back into the group, and for good measure managed to grab a few seconds at the end. 12 seconds for a second across the line, leading the group home. And that's good for the psychology, I'd imagine, for Cadel Evans to know that he's able to chase back on and produce a good sprint at the end. In the grand scheme of things, whether it'll turn out to be all that relevant remains to be seen, but it was encouraging signs, I think, for Cadel Evans, Sean.
Yes, well, I think every second is important, and he just started the sprint there and was the best of the that group of about 16 riders, and picked up a nice time bonification there for his second place. He was in a little bit of difficulty, but it was very short-lived. When Hejadal went in the attack, he was a bit far off, but rectified it, I think, very quickly. And it wasn't really on the descent that he, pulled back the loss he had on Hejadal. He had it done before we started the descent, and just another one of the favours, he followed it down and got down safely.
So it's all up for two of our breakaway riders, Lichtard and Julien Berard. Just one rider left out front, Minguez Ayala of the Euskaltel squad, which, well, presumably he's around about 25. Oh no, Julien Le Bon is in between, so still 55 seconds. In fact, if anything, he's increased by a few seconds. So good effort, you'd have to say, by Minguez Ayala, and he's really piling on the pressure. Been given free rein by his team to really go for it, and he's stomping all over the pedals. And this is a man in control of himself and drawing the absolute maximum out of his body. This bumpy road, as Vinny Fantini putting the hurt on in the peloton, but Minguez Ayala has brought good legs to this race, you'd have to say. Johan Le Bon is chasing, still out front and ahead of the peloton, and tapping out a good rhythm, but it's going to be difficult for him to make it to the top of the hill. Remember, this is a long ramp up, and the top comes with around about 29 kilometers to go. It's back in the bunch. It looks a little more sedate, but they're dragging on the pedals. This is this little 10% ramp that comes midway through. It's average of 3% for the entire climb of Vibo Valentia. But just little killer ramps that will really drag it out of the riders. Tom Bennett-Hughes is looking for an opinion, Sean, about the lots of talk and criticism about Sky's Grand Tour racing style. I mean, what do you think of it? Is it boring? Is it efficient? Is it the right thing to do? Is there any reason that we can criticize it? And is it any different to what teams have done in the past?
No, it's nothing new. In the past, we've seen that many years ago. It's just that the Sky team, they have a real strong team to control the leadership or to look after the leader in a tour, and we've seen that last year in the Tour of France, for example. They were very impressed with the way they controlled in the big mountain stages, and never gave up the opportunity to the other big favourites to cause any problems to Bradley Wiggins. And Nibali was the one who tried a numerous times during the tour, but really never had him in any sort of difficulty that you could get concerned about. And that is, when you've got a good team, you select your riders over a number of years, and that's what Sky have done. And sometimes it can be a little bit boring because they're too strong, and the other favourites, they find it real difficulty to cause any problems to the leader of the Sky team, and that is a problem. But for a Sky situation, it's a great way to be in, and as the leader of a team, when you have a strong team around you, well, it gives you that huge confidence boost.
Yeah, in the days of Eddie Merckx, he signed up all riders that would have been leaders in many other teams, and he just had such a strong squad. Made it worth their while to earn a good living in the service of the top rider. And well, it was so difficult for any of the other teams to really get involved or really to threaten Merckx. And Sky, they have so many strong riders, such a great squad, so well assembled by David Brailsford and crew. Look at these conditions as they head towards the top of the climb. Just 18 seconds now for the second rider on the road, 41 seconds to the leaders, and dull and overcast on top of the hill. Let's have a look at that after this break. Miguel Dominguez Ayala is facing into heavy rainfall at this point. It's just a flurry of rain, although there's been plenty of rain at the finish line, I can tell you, all day. Serra San Bruno has it's dried out a little bit, but the pretty wet roads down there. And this is an extra concern for all the riders, because wet roads, well, they'll be kept cool, I suppose, by that rain, but it's a worry as the roads become slick, especially if they've been dry for any length of time. The group is nice and compact, and we've hit relatively shallow section. The road is still going up, but this is big ring stuff. As Minguez Ayala ploughs on and continues to maintain a decent advantage over the group. Still 49 seconds, so he's only lost 5 or 6 seconds since the road flattened out there, so well, he's doing a good job and certainly going to get the mountains points, you would suggest. Well, having said that, there's still a ways to go. There's a little bit of a downhill section and then a ramp of a kilometre with 6%. So can he save enough energy to be able to hang on ahead of the group? Oh, and then we get another update, and he's down to 35 seconds. So they're taking huge chunks out of it now. Camera bike eager to make his way past, and he's going to get involved in that, and the motorbike really didn't need to be in there, did he, Sean?
No, well, he's pushing to get through, and of course he's making the riders nervous there, and you could see a little bit of a slow up, and they got very close together, and riders are starting to get nervous there. Just a perfect picture. You could see that they all want to start moving to the front. The conditions is, just building the nervousness within the teams, within the riders, because they know that the descent is going to be very important. If it continues on like this, and it's going to be the wet road on the descent, well, then everybody is getting concerned, and you just could feel it there with the shots we had a moment ago.
Yeah, and that's what's happened to Mingus Ayala's lead as well. It's down to 30 seconds just in a heartbeat because so many riders are trying to pile to the front, so they're all piling around each other, and it's less about setting a pace and more about trying to get up there. And now he's trying to work his way through. Obviously under big pressure, the road widens, and great relief for the Camera motorbike. Passenger and rider. And indeed for the for the director of these pictures, as Johan Lebon is picked up. Ledo Betasol rider is also out front of the group. It's Bellemakers, who was in the break yesterday, of course. This isn't Lebon. Lebon, I suspect, could well already have been picked up. That's the likelihood. This is Bellemakers, who was in the break for most of yesterday. And decent average speed. A lot of flat roads, of course, today, and now they're going to hit the hills, so it hasn't been perhaps the hardest day, but interesting decision by Bellemakers to strike for glory. Still a rider out front, but now, though he seems to be making good progress, Mingus Ayala is being dragged back with every few, well, every 10 meters he seems to be losing a second. Bellemakers must be hauling a much bigger gear, you'd have to say. And I wonder, would it do Mingus Ayala any good if Bellemakers came up to him and perhaps he could tag on for a while?
Well, I don't see any good here for either or two riders going out in front with the peloton, you know, just breathing down his neck here. He's not going to even get to the mountain classification and pick up those points, so it's going to be over very quickly. And the way the bunch is getting more and more nervous, speed upping all the time, it's all going to be back together in any moment.
So that's the scene over Campania. Calabria, I should say, as Bellemakers ekes out a 10-second advantage over the peloton. Powering along on a big gear on this flat section of road. He'll rise up again very shortly, but it's all to no avail because he's been towed back by the peloton. Mingus Ayala gets perhaps a little bit of relief as he hits a ramp, and he's got the word in his ear that his days out front, his time is complete. It's been a great effort by Mingus Ayala, so let's give him a big cheer, and let's give him tribute for great effort. He's done a good job for his team. He's put them in the shop window all day, and he's certainly given himself a little bit of a boost as well in career terms, and shown that he's got lots of motivation in the Giro today. He hasn't got any of those bottles to hand to his riders, though, has he? And looks like Hejidal has made his way to the front. Plenty of Garmins up there. Oh, problem for one of the Garmins, though. That's David Miller. David Miller, did he pull a foot out? Was he just shoved to the side and had to take a foot out? That was disappointment for David Miller. Tough day yesterday, and would have liked to have got over this hill. But now he's got a long old chase. Coming at a difficult time. Oh, he's still got some sort of mechanical problem. Calling for his car. And as luck would have it, of course, Ryder Hejidal's well up overall, so he didn't have long to wait. Interesting exchange. So David Miller calling for the car, but brief exchange. Nothing collected in terms of bottles or whatever, and obviously no major mechanical problems, so he'll try and drag himself back up to the group.
Well, I think they had to be a mechanical problem that we could see that he was looking down at his gear at his rear derailleur, and he called the car just to give out to the mechanic and give him a bit of
just explain,
give a few words.
Explain what he was thinking. And Danilo De Luca takes the sunglasses off. Always the problem with glasses. Sant'Onofrio. Cummings has managed to drag himself back in. Ilio Kaise is his companion. Mestre still toiling away and managing to hang on. It's Jack Bobridge of the Blanco squad, who's really suffering there and desperate to try and hang on. Wonderful strong, powerful rider on the flat, but once the road goes up, power to weight ratio is not his friend in that at that moment, as we head towards the top of the hill. And that's the scene at the top of the hill as one of the riders from Argus Shimano decides to head out front. That's Gretsch, the German rider. Plenty of activity, and perhaps dragging the brake back so early hasn't really suited some of the leading teams as we head towards the top of the Vibo Valentia. And that's the scene at the top. We're going to be a difficulty picking out numbers for Mountains points up there. Gretsch could make it easy for everyone. "26 years of age. Been with Argos now. This is his second season with the team. Came over from HTC High Road, did a couple of seasons with them, and having made the move up to the big show from the Thüringer Energy squad. Nasser Bouhanni at the back now, and is that Mark Cavendish? It looks as if it is, accompanied by a couple of the Omega Pharma Quick-Step riders. And that could be all up for Mark Cavendish, and there's another intermediate sprint in between this mountain and the next. So in terms of getting points towards the points classification and getting back into the lead of this competition, it's not looking good for Mark Cavendish.
No, it ain't going to happen. I think the picture we had there just a moment of Cavendish and the rest of the riders, that is the bus of the day, and it's going to be the bus all the way to the finish.
They're going to set it up and figure out what they've got to do.
Well, at this stage, very late into the stage, of course, there's no problem, because a long stage, the time limit to get inside that will be no problem at all. So they're just going to, you know, just go up the hill at an easier pace and spare their energies for another day.
So now it looks as if Gretsch is going to be joined by one of the Bardiani riders.
Perazzi.
Stefano Perazzi of the Bardiani Valvoli CSF Inox squad makes his way up onto the wheel of Gretsch of Argus Shimano, and he could do with a bit of company. Looks cold and a bit miserable up there, but Gretsch heads across the top of the hill with 40 kilometers to go and takes the top Mountains points.
Well, I think that's just the 40 to go, the mountain classification.
Yes, it's just 40.
It's just a little bit further up the road here. We should be within a kilometre, I would reckon, at the moment. So still a long ways out. And of course, Stefano Perazzi, we've seen him many times in the Giro in the past, where he goes in the attack, a real strong rider, but sometimes he goes in the attack when, you know, out of a main peloton is difficult to do, but he is a very aggressive rider.
Well, the main job, you might say, for Bardiani is to make sure they show the jersey every single day. One of the lowest funded teams in the race, as Perazzi takes the top points ahead of Gretsch. At the top of this third category Ascent, it's one of the riders from Movistar that takes third across the line.
Visconti.
Yes, Visconti, who'd lost the jersey, and the likelihood is that he took those third place points, and that could well have put him back into the lead of this competition ahead of Willem Wouters. We look for confirmation of the exact finishing order on the Vibo Valentia, as Perazzi took the top points from Gretsch. Now, what can they do about staying out front? Gretsch, well, you can see the bunch looming behind them. They're not far at all behind. The visibility is very, very poor at the top of this hill, but you can still make out the bunch in the... Well, I hope the bunch can make out that Marshall. And he steps a little bit in. He needed to do, I think, because the riders were going to get late notice of that. The riders on the very front might have some idea about it, but might have been a bit of a surprise to anyone else. And it was Visconti who took third place across the line and gets 2 points, and that puts him back into the lead of this competition by 1 point, ahead of Willem Wouters, with one classification climb to come. Is Wouters still in there? That's the question. It's the back of the bunch, and one of the Columbia riders, perhaps surprisingly, struggling a little bit at the back of the climb, but of course it was a relatively flat run to the conclusion of that hill. Ospina of the Colombia squad. Inside the final 25 miles. It's not going to happen for Gretchen Perazzi. That was perhaps just a bid for the mountain points. Still Gretsch ploughs on. At least he's able to pick out, I suppose, on a wet descent, and it's not particularly wet, it's not very wet, but the visibility is not what it might be.
No, so visibility not good, and the wet street, you only need a little bit wet, and that's where it's most dangerous. If you know it's been raining for all day, a number of hours, well then it's washed off a bit, but just get a little bit damp like this, and that's where it can be very, very dangerous. And it's nervous times here for a lot of the riders, because with the final downhill, and here we're still going down at a very fast rate. I think a lot of nervousness in the bunch here.
Yeah, I suppose from Gretsch's point of view, the longer he can stay out front, even if he's just leading the bunch, at least he's picking his own line around the corners. And you see as they run through that left-hander, the leading 3-4 riders manage to open up a little bit of a gap. And it's getting nervous at the back. Visconti, there's confirmation. He's back in front in the mountains competition by just 1 point ahead of Willem Wouters. Stefano Perazzi leaps up to third and is now a contender. Boaru Aru and several others have scored points, but it's a scrap for Visconti and the rest at the moment. In the early stages of the mountains competition, that order is likely to change significantly as this race progresses. And look at how dark it is over the area around Vibo Valentia. And visibility down to nothing, and if that's the visibility we're getting on our cameras with and they're able to make adjustments for the light, remember, with the filters, you can imagine what it's like in there for the riders. And that's probably an indication of the sort of visibility they've got, or at least the how dark it is for them. So the group is together. It's a Gruppo Compatto, with riders out the back attempting to chase back on in these treacherous conditions coming down off the descent of Vibo Valentia. Okay, the leader moves towards the front of the peloton. Join us for the next part of this stage after this short break. So one rider has stepped out in front of the peloton, but further back there's a difficult moment for Vincenzo Nibali of the Astana team, because he's crashed on the descent of the Vibo Valentia, and he's picked up a bike from this man, Valerio Agnoli, who's now himself chasing behind his team car on a spare bike. Nibali has been picked up by a teammate. He's got to try and make the descent through the team cars. He's made it up to the race director's car, so it looks as if he's going to get back on quite soon, Sean.
Yes, he's making his way back, and we can see here Nibali, the way he can descend. His teammate just not able to follow here, and he makes it onto the rear end of the peloton. I'm not sure if he changed his bike, actually. We only see when he was coming away after taking a bike or taking a wheel from his teammate, but at a very wrong moment. And of course, some of the team cars are allowed through, because we have groups after getting dropped on the climb, and the first number of team cars are allowed to go through to get behind the peloton. But Nibali's team car, Astana, wasn't allowed to go through up to this moment, because he is further down the general classification. So they allow 5 cars to go ahead, and then they allow another 5 cars to go by the group that has dropped. They do not allow them all to go by together, because in case they get the drafting and take the group back to the group that has been dropped back into the peloton again. So unfortunately for Nibali, a real bad moment to have a mechanical.
Yeah, so it might well be that he's not on a different bike, that he got a wheel from Agnoli, in which case the penalty wouldn't be quite as big, because at least he's got his own bike and it's set up properly for him. Having said that, that was a worrying moment for Vincenzo Nibali, but great to get a demonstration of his incredible ability as a descender, and just shows that sometimes it's not always of great value for a teammate to come back out of the peloton and try and pick up his leader. Now we've got Duque of the Colombia squad showing his facility on the descents. We think about the Colombians as great ascenders, not always as great descenders, but Duque is decided to strike clear of the peloton, and he's opened up a small gap.
And Duque, of course, you know, a very good sprinter, a number of years with Cofidis, and we can see there again he's descending very well. Surprisingly for the Colombians, you know, you don't see many of them doing that, but he is one who can certainly descend quite good.
And here's a replay of the moment when Vincenzo Nibali gets going, and I think it is clear that he has picked up a wheel, because there was a wheel missing from that bike on the ground. That's the likelihood anyway.
Yes, he has his own bike, number 31, so just a wheel change. So
just a wheel change for Vincenzo Nibali, and he's safely back in the peloton, but he's got to make his way back up towards the front. We see the race leader, the Maglia Rosa, Luca Paolini, in second position and staying as safe as possible, and just showing you how good he is at descending as well, giving us a demonstration for the second day in succession of his descending ability. Duque out front has a narrow advantage over the peloton, and these relatively wide roads, not so easy to make much of an inroad on the peloton. He's not really a threat overall. Over 9 minutes in arrears. And Paolini staying to the fore. 30 kilometers left in the stage, so within the final 20 miles. And we've got one intermediate sprint left at Soriano Calabro. And then we've got the final ascent of Croce Ferrata. And groups attempting to chase back onto the descent. I wonder, is there any chance? You're pretty certain that the bus that was the bus for the day. Duque is called to account. He's dragged back into the peloton, and Tax coming hot and heavy.
No, I reckon the bus is full, and it's going to just come in at a casual pace. With the way the peloton has been pushing on, I'm quite sure that that group with Mark Cavendish is not going to get back into the main peloton again.
Arga Shimano on the attack once more. They're certainly very animated. That's Gretsch again, I think. Do believe had and Agnoli has managed to make it back. He's done a good job for his team leader and managed to get back into contention, so good professional work from him. Looks like he's on the mechanical setup for Campagnolo. No, he's not quite back, is he? He's just managed to tag onto a group, so he's going to get across another couple of groups if he's going to get back in.
Yes, and many groups here, as we can see. 3 groups we've just seen there, and a number of them further back. And this little bit of the climb, and more so the descent, I think, it's really caused a problem where it's broke the peloton into many groups.
2 riders up front. Gretsch, we believe, is one of them for Arga Shimano. A little bit of a stall there in the bunch, or at least went a little bit wide. Yep, certainly is Gretsch. Seems very eager and enthusiastic, and one of the Lotto Belisol riders. Is it Frederick Willems? I think it could well be, as these riders get set to work in tandem. Willems, the Belgian rider, Gretsch, the German with Arga Shimano. They'll look to establish a decent advantage before the final hill. 12.7 kilometers, the final climb up to the summit of Croce Ferrata, which comes within sight of the finish. The riders working their way back in, including Nathan Haas of Garmin Sharp. Martinez of Androni is there. And his teammate Ermetti picks up a gel. Calling the holes up front for the Sky team is Zandio. Sky in line astern, and you see the 4th rider in line on the right-hand side of the peloton in the Sky, the black and blue outfit is Bradley Wiggins. And a little bit of frustration for Agnoli, because this group isn't going as hard as he'd like it to, and Nasser Bohani, the sprinter from Française de Jeux, is involved. And Agnelli feels the responsibility of having to get in there. Steve Cummings is towards the front of this group. I think that's could well be, is it David Miller, who had his mechanical issues, and he's pretty good man, I'd say. Agnelli will be very relieved to see the likes of David Miller and Steve Cummings on the front of this group, dragging them back towards the peloton. Jack Bobridge in there too, so that's 3 big engines.
The mechanical for Consolet, there are 2 riders from the team stopping, so it must be one of their men that they're hoping to do something in the stage or the general classification, because one of the teammates seemed to be just giving over his wheel.
Let's get a look at this.
Sorry, Ulrika.
Yeah, Ulrika Green Edge.
Apologies.
Peter Weening. Peter Weening has been pretty busy so far in Giro d'Italia, and nice little group coming across there. Was that the Miller group that might just be able to drag him back? And as the road starts to rise a little bit, Bardiani, Valvoli go to the front to try and set the tempo, and they're going at a decent rate. So they're going to make it easier for too easy for these riders to get back into contention.
No, and I think for Bardiani, Valvoli, it's all for Perazzi here to keep the pace high, and for the GP classement.
Well, that's the scene at the stage finish in Serra San Bruno, as we see problems aplenty out on the course. Movistar, well, the Movistar team, Herrada needs to get a wheel. Wheel coming off the rack, because they've been. That's Alex Dowsett, actually. Yeah, I thought it was Herrada.
Give him a push, for God's sake.
Yeah. Alex Dowsett, the reigning British time trial champion, and a rider in his first Grand Tour. A bit of disappointment there for him, because he's got a lonely ride from now on. Hopefully he'll pick up a group. Meanwhile, up front, these 2 riders tapping out a good rhythm, and now their advantage has extended to almost half a minute. So Grech and Frederick Willems up front. Grech for the Argus Shimano team. Frederick Willems for Lotto Belisol have established an advantage of just half a minute, with Bardiani Valvoli setting the tempo on the front of the peloton. We'll pick up the rest of the stage after this.
Thank you again. Thanks a lot.
So Grech and Willems of Argus and Lotto Belisol have been dragged back, and they're leaving it to the climbers, to the specialists. And there's the scene at the finish line. So it's wet roads that face the riders, and it's tricky to say it's wide roads on the last 6 kilometers of a descent down to the finish, but the surface is pave. It's sort of a cobbled street, so it's going to be very, very difficult for the riders in terms of staying upright in those last few kilometers. At least it's wide open roads, so it's not quite as twisty and technical as yesterday's stage. But still, it'll certainly keep their attention. Marco Marcato. Forge is clear, and there's a Bardiani rider is trying to chase up to him. Very difficult to make him out in the gloom. Is it Gatto?
Perazzi.
Perazzi of Bardiani.
I think he's interested in the mountain classification, so he knows that there's possibly an opportunity to mark up some points in the GPM classement.
Look at this, great ride by Valerio Agnelli. He's chasing across through the groups. He's hit the lower slopes now, so he's left the specialist time trial riders, the likes of David Miller and Steve Cummings behind. Leaped across to another group. And now we see the groups in dribs and drabs. This is a group developing behind as we see. Yeah, it is Stefano Perazzi and Mercato of Vacansoleil pushing ahead. Let's hear from Jean-Paul Van Poppel.
Yes, like I said, it's a climb for a second category, or for the second line. But on the other hand, if you come there with the bunch, we saw in the last Grand Tours that also GC riders try to take a few seconds. But if you see from the top to the finish is still a long way, and they might come back. So I don't think. I think for sure there's riders for the second line, and it's an excellent day for the breakaway. It's almost 250 kilometers, so it's a long day. I don't think there's teams who wants to control for that long, and so it might be a day for us as well, because this is kind of stage where we're looking for.
Well, Jean-Paul Van Poppel will be absolutely delighted with the performance of his Vacansoleil rider, Mercato, who's forging out in front and at least trying to get involved in it.
Well, I think he was hoping to get the breakaway, and of course they did get in with who was the man from Pim Linkart. He was up there. I think they would be preferring, the way Poppel was talking there, he was hoping for a breakaway to go all the way, but it hasn't happened that way. It's Katusha who's controlled the situation, and when he talk about the descent, you know, it's a long ways from the finish. I'm not sure if it's that long, like 6.7 kilometers. I know it's not really a downhill, but still, if you get a rider who is quite strong, or a number of riders who get an advantage, and it all does depend on which riders get into a move as we get to the top of this summit, because if it's some of the favourites, well then the other favourites will react. But if it's a rider who is not really dangerous in the general classification, we could see maybe some small group actually pulling away and going on to the finish.
A little group developing out front. Mercato is still there for Vacansoleil, so too is Perazzi of Bardiani. He's a Colombian rider in there. And Vinny Fantini also represented, as indeed our AG2R. This group trying to work as well as they possibly can. These hills going up in a series of ramps, so there's little sections where it's for the specialist climbers and little sections where perhaps they don't carry the same advantage. An average of 5.5% on this hill. As they hit the final 20 kilometers. Plenty of work still to be done for this group if they're to hang on out in front. Mercato goes to the front as they hit a little downhill section. Causes difficulty for his breakaway companions as they set a big pace, and meanwhile back in the peloton it's Luca Paolini in second position in the Maglia Rosa, and he's got a teammate up front for Katusha setting the tempo. Garmin Sharp also represented at the front, so too are the Movie Star squad.
4, 3, 2, 1 and 0. Don't talk, please. Please don't talk. Encouraging.
Pantani still a big hero throughout Italy as Mercato goes out front for Vacansoleil, heading towards the intermediate sprint. He'll take the points, and indeed the 5 seconds time bonus that goes with it, of limited value, that you'd have to say. Now, will he forge on alone? That would appear to be the ambition. Hermetti it is that's attempting to get back on terms. Meanwhile, at the back of the peloton, Fabio Fellini of Androni Giocattoli hangs on grimly. If he looks over his shoulders, he'll see the He'll see the Commissar's cars and realise just how vulnerable he is. No doubt he can hear the engines and will be getting that sinking feeling. Inside 18 kilometres to go. 20 seconds now the advantage, so it's a handy little advantage if they... and the tempo being set by Katusha riders is all about controlling this gap, but as much as anything setting a tempo that Luca Paolini is comfortable with, and which, well, at least they hope will discourage other riders from attacking.
Yes, well, that is a tactic, of course. Paolini, a good climber, but certainly he doesn't like the explosive attacks, and his teammates are just continue on to put in a good fast pace here, and that will calm everybody, because when you do that, well, then other riders are not prepared to go on the attack, and with the 5 riders out in front here, they're working well together, pulling out a nice advantage, but still, you know, a long ways to the top of this one, because 17 kilometres, 17.5 kilometres to finish, and the final climb of the day, there's just around 7 kilometres, so still a good 10 kilometres to go. It's not all the time going uphill. There's a little bit of easier sections in it, but still a long way to this final summit.
Problems for the Movistar squad.
Ventoso.
Yeah, Ventoso in his national champions jersey picks up a wheel from a teammate. And gets going again as we get a little replay, and his teammate will wait patiently as we get a nice sight of excellent smooth teamwork with Lastras doing a good team job. Is this Sylvain George struggling, or has he moved out ahead? Looks like he's moved ahead of the other 3 riders. Pirazzi, Quintero and Rabatini of Vinny Fantini are in there. Sylvain George has moved to try and get back on terms with Marcato. Marcato of Vacansoleil out front. George of AG2R chasing at just a few seconds remove. And Ventoso looks comfortable. Oh, and he nearly took the wheel of that Cannondale rider out. It's Cameron Worf, who, as I said earlier in the broadcast, is suffering with a little bit of a bout of the flu.
And not a good time for Ventoso to have a mechanical problem, the flat, because he's a rider who can get over this climb. If it is very aggressive in the final kilometres of the summit, he can, as a sprinter, he can get over quite well, so not a good time for him to have the mechanical problem.
Interesting, I haven't seen much of the GC contenders yet. They're obviously keeping their powder dry for as long and as late as possible. Any speculation on what's likely to happen towards the top end? Are we going to see Hejidal thrown a few shapes again?
Well, yesterday we had, you know, a surprise to see Hejidal very active in that final kilometres of the climb, and then on the descent more active again. So it's possible we could see some of the riders here having a go today, but it depends if Katusha can keep a real strong pace all the way on this climb. That will I think it won't invite any riders to go on the attack when you keep a real good pace. If it slows down a bit and there's an opportunity, well, then we can see the attacks. And but again, it depends. It's this 5-man group where they're allowed to pull away the advantage, because at the moment they seem to be pulling out very, very slowly. But there has to be some teams in here who feel that, well, we can do something here if we re-up the pace and just get as little as riders as possible over the top of the climb. Get rid of certainly the better sprinters, and then go on to try and get a stage victory in the sprint in a group of maybe 50-60 riders.
Looked like Marcato coming back, so obviously it is Sylvain George out front on his own, and I think that could well have been Marcato they're picking up, so he blew a gasket just while we were out of shot. And the leading group Kaiser at the back of this group, as the peloton is whittled down one by one. Riders are jettisoned out the back. Up front, Sylvain George pushes on 51 seconds from the leader to the group behind. And he's a picture of pain mixed with concentration. Goes to the radio for a little bit of help and encouragement.
Vincente Renes doesn't like the hills.
No, he certainly doesn't like them today. And that gap is going out very quickly indeed. So impressive work by Sylvain Georges up front.
Yes, he's climbing very well. We can see that he's really digging in, putting in a big effort, suffering a lot, but he's working well at it and putting the advantage out, as we can see now, 1:17 at the moment.
And AG2R, interesting tactics for them. Of course, they've a couple of mountain goats in the team in the shape of Domenico Pozzovivo and the emerging Colombian Carlos Betancourt. Sylvain Georges, good man to have out front. And good tactical opportunities for them, although in the mountains I think it's just about trying to see what you can do, and clearly Sylvain Georges has good legs. His breakaway companions very shortly going to be back in the group. Perazzi, Quintero and Rabatini. Perazzi of the Bardiani squad in the green kit, as we see Danilo Wiss. His legs have cried enough. George, though, still looks like he's full of fight and goes for the radio again. He's presumably looking for time checks and looking for the encouragement of it.
Yes, or possibly, can I stop?
No, you can't. I think it's probably the answer there. Well, thumbs up from Vinotti of the Astana. He's done his work. 43 seconds, so it's that gap is being pared down, and probably the gap is changing as this climb goes up in little ramps, a series of ramps, little flat sections followed by little steep sections. Bradley Wiggins in the group. First time we've seen him up close today, and looks very comfortable indeed, you'd have to say. Able to close his mouth for a few moments. He's not huffing and puffing too much, so this is clearly not taking too much out of him, as these three riders try to hang on for as long as possible. Perazzi of Bardiani, Rabatini in the distinctive yellow Vini Fantini kit, and Quintero in the dark Colombian kit. And Sky have taken it up, so now for Paolini, his heart will be pounding a little more, because he now realizes that it's the general classification contenders that are going to set the tempo, and he's just got to try and hang on as long as he possibly can to see, can he hang on to his Maglia Rosa for another day.
Daniel Honda throwing faces there in the cars. Of course, another one that does not like the climbs.
No, he's a galloper.
Sprint specialist.
Yes, yes, and now at 39 years of age, still showing impressive motivation to take on another Grand Tour. Danilo De Luca sitting in fourth place for Vini Fantini, obviously in good form, although he looks as if he's really thrashing around on the pedals. It's not coming as easy to him. Nice tempo being set by the Skies up front. Siutsu, as we might have expected. Konstantin. And Siutsu up front, and two teammates for Bradley Wiggins. So Sky it is that have decided to take control. Fellini of Androni Giocattoli moves in front of Longo Borghini of the Cannondale team, and just about manages to hang on for a little while longer as Siutsu sets the pace out front. Interesting that Siutsu struggled yesterday. He lost 4 minutes and 30 seconds, which might have been a bit of a surprise. He's a wonderful domestique, really is able to produce great power on the flat and in the hills. So he may have hit a problem or two, but it was a surprise that he didn't make it into the lead group at the conclusion of the race, of the stage. So these three riders are back, their days are done. Perezzi, Quintero and Rabatini can take a drink and make way for the Sky Machine. And 4 riders indeed it is, as Hainaut in second place. Many people's tip for the top in years to come. And legs exploding all over the peloton. Some riders trying to at least hang on for as long as they can.
Kobo.
Yeah, Kobo's had he's had a bad time so far, really. He's been involved in that little crash before the team time trial, and got dropped by his team in the team time trial, then lost a couple of minutes yesterday. So it has not really been a great Giro d'Italia so far for the team leader of the Movistar team.
No, and since his Vuelta victory almost 2 years ago, he hasn't really, produced anything since that. Very impressive in that Vuelta which he won, but since that he really haven't produced any sort of performance in that way.
Rigoberto Urán is in there for Bradley Wiggins as well, so he's got his 3 top mountain domestiques are setting the tempo, and they're causing carnage behind. The Androni Giocattoli team is very few of them left in there at this point. Cadel Evans concentrating hard, but looks reasonably comfortable, in as much as anyone could possibly conceivably be comfortable on this climb of Croce Ferrata. Scarponi is in there as well, and right to the fore of this group. Sietsu sits steady on a bike and lets the pedals do all the work. All of his energy goes into the pedals. Fellini still at the back of the group and having to close gaps, and this could well be... Oh no, he manages to drag himself back over the top, and every time another rider cracks, he has to go around him. So sitting at the back is really not where he wants to be, but he's obviously in a world of hurt, and it's all he can do to just close gaps as it happens. Bruno Pires of Team Saxo Tinkoff at the back as well. Sylvain George goes to the radio again. What's the word? What's the update? Well, you're still out front. You've got 38 seconds, and you're doing a great job. Sylvain George, now 29 years of age, took overall victory in the Rhône-Alpes a couple of years ago. Took a couple of stages in that event as well. That's probably his most impressive success. Also won Grand Prix Ploumenec, and indeed won a stage of the Tour of California last year. How can we forget? Of course, wasn't it? It was a big win for the AG Tour at that time. They hadn't won a race all the way up till May, and managed to get victory in the Tour of California. I remember he was out front for a long time, and he just about hung on. It wasn't certain he was going to make it, and the relief and ecstasy were in equal measure at the conclusion of that at that stage. Great win, and much needed for his team at that point. And Sylvain George, can he deliver another success for them? You'd have to say it's going to be a big ask. There's still a long way to go to the top of this hill. Now at 31 seconds, and Sietsu looks very comfortable indeed. He's able to take his glasses off and put them in his pocket. So to Bradley Wiggins, concentrating hard. And the flash photography, I think that just tells you all you need to know about how overcast it is. Flash photography really lighting up Sylvain George's face.
And we can see the weather conditions, the road getting very wet once again. Luckily for the riders, it's uphill all the way, really. There's no great downhill today, so they will be happy with that, because as we see yesterday, when you have a downhill in the very final, well, it becomes very dangerous, very technical, and some riders really want to push on. So they will be happy today that it's an uphill mountain top finish.
And the other teams are happy to leave it up to Sky to set the tempo. They won't necessarily be happy with the tempo they're setting.
Well, I think some are happy for the moment, but still just under the 12 kilometres to go. They're going to play the waiting game, allow Sky to continue on setting this train for a number of kilometres. And anybody that's thinking of going in the attack, it's far too out from the finish at the moment. They're going to play the waiting game.
Looks a little bit anxious, but of course the rain for Bradley Wiggins will be a concern. second in the standings. If Luca Paolini cracks, he's going to take the jersey. That would appear to be the likelihood, unless there's a big skirmish towards the top of this hill. Just a little sight of the white jersey of Fabio Aru of the Astana team. He's leading the young riders classification. And one of the leading domestics for Vincenzo Nibali, perhaps contender in his own right in years to come. Now the gap is inside half a minute, and Sylvain Georges' time out front is surely coming to an end. Paolini still well to the fore. Question in on Twitter at DQ Sport: are deals agreements by pro teams more likely to be made with wildcard teams or pro teams? Well, do they make deals at all, John?
Well, there is deals. You know, if you're in a breakaway and there's a rider in the general classification, you know you're going to get to the finish. Sometimes, like the Peloton, they allow the breakaway to just ride away and take you know, a big number of minutes, and the best man in the general classification, and he's going to take the race leadership. So sometimes, like some of the riders, then if you get into a final with two riders, it's a perfect situation where the one who has taken overall leadership of the race, he allows the other rider to have a stage victory, and they both contribute 100%, and into the final they really work well together in that way.
Sylvain Georges still out front, 23 seconds to the good as the road opens up a little bit closer to the top. Now within 11 kilometers of the finish of the stage. He's got about 6 from the so about 5 to the top of the hill. Siutsu looks very calm and composed, and just as I say, he gurns a little bit, so you wonder how much longer he's going to be out front. Perhaps he's done his slot, and he'll hand it over to Hainaut. Still with Hainaut and Uran. Wiggins is in good shape indeed. And you would these roads, this wet road is going to make a difference to how it's played on the descent. Somebody is going to try. Will the leading contenders, do you think? Well, Vincenzo Nibali, we've seen him. He is one of those daring riders who's willing to take a chance on a wet road. Although I seem to remember him coming to grief a few years ago in Tour of Lombardy on wet roads. His demon descending was expected to carry him to potential success, but instead, of course, he just pushed a little bit too hard on the descent, and that's always the danger. But clearly never lacking for commitment, as we see a little bit of commitment being shown by Danilo De Luca. The killer has decided to head out front of the group. The SkyTrain will just watch and observe and continue to use the power that they feel is necessary to get to the top of the hill with maximum efficiency. But De Luca has managed to separate himself from the peloton, and this is an interesting development. One of the Colombian riders has decided that it's an interesting move, and he wants to get involved as well. So Sylvain Georges could well have some company very soon, and as we get the shot from the front, indeed, Danilo De Luca is coming up very quickly, and Sylvain Georges has got the word. He looks over his shoulder, and he'll try and take a little bit of a breather and get onto the wheel of Danilo De Luca as quickly as possible. So 3 riders up front. One of the Colombian team also manages to tag on to this. And De Luca, the glasses are coming off again. They went back on for a while, now they're coming off, and few just opens up a bike length advantage over Sylvain Georges, and I wonder if Georges is going to be any use to him. De Luca isn't really thinking about Georges. Ventoso has managed to tag himself onto the back of a group. Is this the lead group? Well, I'd be very impressed if it is, and it looks as if it is. That's a great ride by Ventoso.
Yes, I think he's made the effort to get back in there, but he's paying the price at the moment. We can see he's having difficulty holding in there in that main group, and normally he would be able to do that, but he had the mechanical also at the wrong moment and had to make a big effort to get back in, and is paying the price at the moment.
So Danilo De Luca has jettisoned Sylvain Georges, and he'll go back to the peloton. But De Luca, what's the thinking here? Is this for himself and to see what he can do, or is there perhaps a stalking horse for Sant'Ambrogio?
I suppose you just go out there and see what the reaction is, first of all. If in the main peloton, there's not a reaction immediately, you could pull out a nice advantage, and De Luca could go on and contest for the stage victory. But also, for the other riders in the team, maybe for Gazzelli, he wants to, keep the pace real high, make it more aggressive, and that way he can also have a go and go for a chance to have a stage victory himself.
So Sylvain Georges puts the gilet on because he's straight out the back, and he'll just trickle to the top of the hill as best he can, and then coast down to the finish. It was a good effort. It's a fine effort, but just not good enough. Didn't have the power required. Meanwhile, De Luca, well, he's opened up a significant gap. We haven't got a time check on it, and with the mist on this Croce Ferrata hill, it's impossible to see. De Luca steals a little look over his shoulder, but he's not going to get a whole lot of information out of that, I don't think. And Robinson's Chalaput Gomez of the Colombian squad looks like he's full of fight as well. Robinson Eduardo Chalaput flicks the elbow, does a turn and flicks the elbow, and De Luca with a much faster, much higher cadence, a lower gear, very efficient climbing style, busy, compact style from De Luca. As Androne Ermetti is hanging on at the back of this dwindling peloton. And Calaput's really feeling the effects, and there's no doubt but the stronger of the two riders here is De Luca, I believe. Any thoughts on that, Sean?
Yes, he looks like to be the strongest, and but he's making the other rider contribute here, and just under the 8.7, 6.7 on the summit to the finish, so a little under 2 kilometers to go to the summit, and then if they get to that point with 15 seconds advantage, well, it's all to play for.
Danilo De Luca out front with Chalaput Gomez, Robinson Chalaput Gomez of the Colombian team. A wild card choice, and they're certainly getting involved in the action and in with a great chance of getting involved with stage success. Remember, the last kilometre of this hill is probably the toughest, so there's still plenty of racing to do before they get over the top of Croce Ferrata. But Danilo De Luca has set his stall out and has opened a significant gap, waiting to get the time check. But no sign of the peloton behind, and glasses went on, they come back off again. He needs some sort of automatic system for taking off and on his glasses. I think maybe he needs a little strap around them. And there's Siutsu has done his job. Siutsu is out of it. It'll be left up to Ainau up front, and Uran to pace Bradley Wiggins to the top. Meanwhile, Steve Morabito of the BMC squad is also in trouble. And it's not happening. It's interestingly enough, looks like a Bardiani rider on the front of the peloton. So whether that's they're trying to slow down the chase of the Sky team, that's what you have to assume. They've gone to the front and just soft pedaled a little bit and trying to interrupt the chase a little bit. It's hard to imagine that Bardiani are chasing their own man.
Well, Vinny Fantini is, of course, the team of
Vinny
DeLuca.
Fantini, sorry,
yes.
excuse me, yes.
The colours, of course, you can get a bit mixed up, but
Bardiani,
of course, yes. For Perazzi, I think he is maybe trying for the mountain classification again if he's still there, but other than that, I don't see why the reason they are chasing at the moment at this point, because we still have quite a number of kilometres to go, over 7 kilometres, but with the mountain classification coming up, it looks like that's the reason that Bardiani are chasing.
Okay, so likely to be Perazzi on the front of the group, as it's Calaput Gomez that takes the points at the top of the Croce Ferrata, and they're now heading down the descent. Well, it's a descent stroke flat road, but it's complicated enough for these riders. Danilo De Luca takes second over the top of the hill. Let's see who of the group, well, we didn't get a sight of the bunch going through, so no idea who got that, and whether who exactly is going to be in the lead of the Mountains jersey after today's competition, but it's of little relevance or interest at the moment to Jackson Rodriguez of the Androni Giocattoli squad, because he's struggling manfully to hang on. He's managed to make it over the top of this descent. Now, what can Danilo De Luca do about holding off this chasing peloton? The gap didn't look to be more than about sort of 15 seconds or so.
And of course, De Luca, he's a very good ascender, and we could see there he was just going to, take the front, and he just touched his breakaway companion there, and goes to the front, and we can see him pushing on, taking 5-6 bike lengths already, and this is on the straight section. But if it gets a bit more technical, which it is a little bit more, but still it's quite a big road here, and we can see the bunch in the background there. Is that a motorbike? No, it's the bunch, so there's only 8-10 seconds maximum.
Well, De Luca's jumped Calaput. He's managed to open up several bike lengths advantage. He's able to put down quite a bit extra power. Well, it looks as if Calaput's managed to make his way back up to them, so that's a little... They really don't need to be scrapping like that. They've hit a flat section of road, and this is where it's going to be particularly difficult for De Luca to hang on. But the group is lined out behind, and they're really racing here to get back on terms as we get confirmation of the mountains classification. It was Visconti that took the points from the group in third place over the top of the hill. So Visconti, I believe, is likely to go back into the lead of the mountains competition and wear that blue jersey tomorrow. But we will get full confirmation of that at the conclusion of this stage. Meanwhile, out front, it's all about De Luca and Calaput as they hit the 5 kilometre to go banner. Steals a little look over his shoulder. You're not going to get much information looking that side. And indeed, it's still worth fighting for. About 10 seconds or so.
Yes, about that, and at the 5 kilometre mark it starts to go downhill a bit more. We're on a flatter section here, but about 4.5 kilometres to finish, it goes down, for a good kilometre and a half. It kicks up again a little bit, but pretty much downhill all the way to the finish. And if there's a little bit of a downtime in the peloton, but which I doubt, because the peloton looks to be very big all the time. There's at least 50 riders there, so there has to be some teammates for riders that will take up the chasing.
And the last kilometre and a half is fundamentally flat. So what sort of a gap does De Luca and Calaput, what do they need at that point?
Well, they need to hold on to that 15-second advantage going into that final 1.52 kilometres to the finish. As we can see, just under 5 kilometres at the moment. It's going to be very, very tight for them to hold on. But again, it depends in the peloton, who gets organised back there. And if there's a team gets organised with 2 riders and they give sacrifice themselves, give it 100%, well, they would close down very quickly.
Hard to tell there. Maybe about 10 seconds advantage with 4.4 kilometres remaining. Danilo De Luca, the man they call the killer, a controversial figure in cycling, certainly a colourful figure, and he's animated the Giro d'Italia in many ways over the years, and striking out for victory on stage 4 of this year's race. 9 seconds is the official gap. He's going to need a little bit more than that. And I'm assuming it's all about De Luca, but the way that Calaput was able to get back to De Luca indicates that he's feeling very strong indeed. Neither of these riders would be classed as a sprinter, so if it comes down to sprint between the two of them, it's difficult to say. De Luca certainly seems much the more confident through those bends.
Yes, well, De Luca is definitely the better descender and also the better sprinter. He can, in a smaller group or in a 2-up sprint, he should be the better one, but he's doing all the pace setting at the moment, and when you do that in the final number of kilometres, then you can pay the price in the final run to the line. 3 kilometres to go, and we can see the gap is still holding on there. They must have plus 9 seconds at the moment. And this is one of the sections where it just goes up a little bit, and this is where it's going to be difficult for the two out in front. You know, the big group chasing, that's where it gets difficult for a two-man breakaway. You can lose your advantage very quickly.
De Luca now 37 years of age, as we see Astana Domestics disappearing from contention. Tirolongo, I think that was, who dropped out 7 seconds now, so it looks as if they're closing in on them. De Luca, winner of this race back in 2007, and now 37 years of age. You would say his days as a GC contender are probably behind him. Former winner of Liège-Bastogne-Liège, Tour of Lombardy, Flèche Wallonne. It's been a storied career, there's no doubt about it. And this perhaps an opportunity to taste champagne in the swan song of his career. And there's no lack of motivation and no lack of commitment through these bends, and you can see that Chalaput is not enjoying it. He's enjoying, I think, perhaps the fact that De Luca is able to set such a great tempo, but each time they go through a turn, Chalaput has to push to get back into the wheel of Danilo De Luca. This little bit of a ramp, will it be to De Luca's advantage? He's a great climber, of course. But the group behind, well, they're within seconds. The camera is foreshortening the gap. De Luca steals a little glance over his shoulder, but he realizes the game is up. 1.7 kilometers to go. And riders behind changing. Is this a problem for? Is it? Well, not certain who that was. But it's not coming at a good time. And Chalaput it is that goes to the front, as we see Salerno of the Cannondale squad manages to get a quick wheel and gets back in.
It's going to be tight.
Well, he's put Chalaput on the front.
Well, it's the thing he's got to do, because
he's got to jump him at this stage.
Well, De Luca has been pulling for a long time, and it's the place to be now, and he's going to, you know, have a glance over his shoulder and try and go for a long one here on the sprint. It's
AG2R that are leading it out. Luca Paolini is very much involved, there's no doubt, but that he's going to hang on to his Maglia Rosa because he's very much in the group. Could he conceivably make it 2 stage wins in successive days? He's right in the box seat and with a great opportunity and getting a great lead out. He's also got a teammate there that could perhaps take it up. Indeed he has. He's slotted in as AG2R drop off the back. The leading contenders are there. De Luca moves on, moves ahead of Chalaput and into this little cobble section towards the conclusion. He's within the last 700 meters. Surely he can't hang on. It looks impossible, but he's still got a gap, and you can be sure that he's got to push all the way to the line. His face is contorted in pain. There is no lack of effort here from Danilo De Luca as the Katushas line it up for Luca Paolini, one of the stronger gallopers amongst this whittled down peloton, racing towards glory on stage 4 of Giro d'Italia. Danilo De Luca hangs on, but surely he's not going to make it. We see is that Uran on the left hand side for the Sky Pro cycling squad, and also Bardiani involved there. Who've they managed to get to the finish? Androni are in there. Movistar also have riders, and it's just pain all the way to the line. Bardiani, Valvoli are going to get victory on stage 4 of Giro d'Italia. Incredible, wonderful success for the smallest and the least funded team on the in the race, and a team that struggles to make the budget and get involved each year, and just waiting for confirmation for which one of their riders. Amazing that they could have got so many of them through to the finish, and they all have their arms in the air to celebrate wonderful victory. Battaglin, of course, is one of their stronger riders.
Yes, I don't think it could be battling in that finish, but you know, there's a number of riders there capable of getting to the finish, and we could see there it was just a struggle for everybody to make it to the line.
Well, that was a hard stage, no doubt about it, and the group whittled down. Danilo De Luca made them fight for it. 6 hours and 14 minutes in the saddle for the riders today. And here was the gallop for the line. Sprinting towards glory. A scrap amongst non-sprinters, you'd have to say, and wonderful success.
Battaglia.
And it is Enrico Battaglin, a famous name in cycling, and giving the Bardiani Valvoli squad a welcome shot in the arm. What a wonderful success. And he seems a little bemused, you'd have to say.
Well, Battaglia, of course, a very good sprinter, but in a running like that, I would not expect him to be in there, but great performance.
There's confirmation of the stage results. It's Enrico Battaglin that takes victory ahead of Fabio Fellini, who was at the back of the group for so much up the final climb. Visconti gets third on the day, and some great mountain points as well, so it's a good run for him. Rigoberto Urán was in there for Sky Pro Cycling. Didn't quite have the sprint on the day, but certainly a good result for him. And Enrico Battaglin, it is that gets his arms in the air and takes stage victory on stage 4 of Giro d'Italia. And Battaglin looks behind and realizes that he's got the gap necessary to take a famous victory in the Giro d'Italia, and for the first time in 6 hours and 14 seconds he can smile. His face lights up with delight. And look at the way his bike is moving around on this wet surface, scrabbling for grip, scrabbling for traction on the run up to the line. Cadel Evans on the right hand side just didn't quite have it for the BMC squad. And most of the leading contenders very much involved as the riders come in dribs and drabs. Is that Sietsus, one of the Sky squad? And Battaglin making his way towards the podium. 23 years of age, and this by some considerable margin his greatest success. Took a stage of the Città di Peccioli Coppa Sabatini a couple of years ago, but this his first stage win in the Giro d'Italia.
Jersey up. Looked like a long, hard day, but how was it in pink for you?
Sì, è stata una giornata lunga, faticosa, però l'obiettivo di tenere la maglia è arrivato.
So a long, hard day for Luca Paolini in the pink jersey, but great relief that he was able to hang on in there for another day, and he will wear the Maglia Rosa for stage 5 coming up tomorrow. It's 199 kilometers as we get the confirmation of the overall standing. 17-second advantage Paolini carries into stage 5 ahead of Rigoberto Urán, who now moves ahead of his teammates. So Bradley Wiggins was missing from that group, so that's interesting. He slipped down to 6th position. We didn't get sight of that, but
yes, well, a lot of groups there. I was just seeing that as we came in there. There was a little splits in the group, so I think quite a big number of groups got time gaps there.